just trying to get a handle on all this.
Okay, this is the Town of Nantucket Board of Appeals meeting, Friday, March 29th, 2019, with, we're going to be discussing the Surfside Crossing 40B application. I have to admit, with the 1,000 pages, were there minutes?
No,
Okay,
not yet.
so that's, I didn't miss them in the 1,000. I didn't think I saw them. So, what's that? 1,100? Yeah. Oh,
7.
my bad. So, having said that, can I get somebody to make a motion to approve the agenda as written?
I'll make that motion.
And we'll let Lisa take that one. Kiram, you want to second it? Kiram seconds it. Any further discussion?
No.
No. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. So, moving right along, I'm going to let the applicant is new counsel, we'll let him introduce himself, let us know what's going on.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Paul Haverty, Blattman, Bobrowski, and Haverty, representing the applicant. Sorry, I just need to put this down. I am a 40B attorney out of Concord, Massachusetts. I've done 40B developments representing developers and municipalities all over the state. As you know, my clients were forced to sort of change horses midstream and bring me in, so I did just get brought on board this week. I'm not 100% up to date on everything that's gone on throughout this process, but I'm here to try to help us get over the hump and get to the end of the process. My understanding was that there was a hearing on Tuesday night that perhaps didn't go as well as everybody would have liked it to. And the sticking point seemed to be what sort of information was necessary for this board to issue a decision on an alternative concept plan at 92 units. So I have actually reached out, since I was brought on board on Wednesday, I've reached out to counsel for the board and to your consultant, Mr. Marchant, to try to get a sense of what it is that got us to this point and what it is that the board is looking for. And I've had discussions with my clients in terms of what it is that they can provide to the board and what they would like to see as sort of the process for the rest of the hearing. And I think we have something that hopefully will be workable for the board. As I understand it, what the board was looking for was to have, you know, sort of the proper plans and information in your record necessary to support a decision, whatever it may be, on a 92-unit project. As I understand, my client is not really advocating the 92-unit project as their preferred concept, but they're willing to accept a decision on that project. So I do think that it's, you know, incumbent upon them to have the information in the record as well. So what I have suggested, and what I hope, you know, will be amenable to the board, would be for my clients to actually agree to extend have one more hearing night within 2 weeks by, I think you have a regularly scheduled hearing for April 11th, before which time we will submit sufficient additional information to give you enough material for the record that you can make a decision, you know, yay or nay, on a 92-unit plan. And if that's something that you see as workable, then, you know, we're certainly happy to agree to that. But it would be for one more hearing. So it would mean that there wouldn't be any hearings in between that time, because we wouldn't have given you any additional information before then anyways.
Okay. This is a new twist.
It is. I feel like.
How does everybody feel about it? Or does anybody feel they want
So
to
we
talk
would
about it?
only have an extension until the 11th?
Correct.
Well, I will say this, I will be there on the 11th, but I'm taking the 4:30 boat. So, you know, the regularly scheduled meeting will have an agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's super full,
No, I have one withdrawal and one continuance, so it's not too bad.
right? But I always think things are going to take less time than they do. So there's going to be very little time to discuss the new proposal. I'm for the idea. When do you anticipate we would get the material so that we could at least review it?
I don't think there'll be a lot of lead time. We have had discussions with the applicant's consultants in terms of the time it will take to come up with these additional plans and this additional information, and I think we're going to be right up, to the 11th date. So
I
it,
I'd like more, I mean, it would be nice to have another week.
Then we hit school vacation
Is
week,
it
and
the
then it's
18th
Easter.
is-
Right.
Well, I mean, the net of it is, in my opinion, they can extend to whenever they want or not want to.
Right.
I mean, clearly, the more time that both sides have is going to give everybody an opportunity to get to a better place. But if the 11th's the date, we'll do the best we can. What it means is, obviously, once we start on the deliberations, I might ask right off the bat that if we could get more time on the deliberation side of things, so at least the board can discuss the plans.
I just don't think it's fair for us to get all this information on the 10th and be expected to
Well,
come to
so,
meeting on the 11th and
just-
make.
to clarify, the additional information is really not going to be the sort of information, that is going to lead to necessarily a lot of questions. It's really support for information that's already out there and available. It's just some additional details. It's not like you're going to be getting a whole new concept plan.
Yeah, I
It's
agree.
going to be consistent with what's been previously reviewed and which I'm sure you will spend, however much time tonight discussing. So I don't think it's going to take a lot of review time or a lot of discussion time during that hearing. I do understand that you're going to want time, to review once the hearing has been closed, and I'll talk to my clients, about that issue. It's something that we can address on the 11th, presuming we're going in that direction.
Are we reviewing that plan tonight, then? Do we have that plan to review?
It's the 92-unit concept plan.
I know, but this package of 1,100 pages is all about the 100-unit plan.
Well, first of all, it isn't, but, I'm not criticizing that you didn't get a chance to read all 111 pages, or 1,100 pages, but I guess, I don't think we're going to discuss the 92-unit plan tonight because we don't have the plans. We've discussed it in concept, and one of our sticking points was simply we don't really know what's going on because the plans aren't detailed enough. So that's why we asked 2 meetings ago for the detailed plans. So now we're hearing that those plans will be made available to us. But I don't see any great need to go into a lot of detail. No, yes, maybe.
The applicant's engineer is here tonight as well, so if you do have specific questions, that those can be addressed.
You could start to identify what more.
Yeah,
We had a list of
okay.
things that we
We can
needed.
go through the list
We'll go
again.
through the list
I
again.
will say, just as an editorial comment, if the package of information we receive on, let's say, the 10th, hopefully not at the meeting, I would frankly think it could be a few days before then, is up to the level of this particular bunch of information we got. I mean, there's going to be, this was,
I don't think it's going to look like that.
I should hope not, because this was ludicrous. I mean, there was stuff in here that was from the 100-unit plan, the 156-unit plan, the 92-unit plan. I didn't even know what I was looking at a certain point. So what we asked for at the last time, and what we would be asking for again, is only that information that pertains to the 92-unit plan and is pertinent, not how we got to the decision that you got to. Okay? I mean, is that
That's
fair?
certainly fine. We're not looking to give you another gigantic booklet of information. In fact, we want to limit the additional information that's being provided, and mainly because, it's not a huge amount of time to get it put together. And we want you to have the information that's necessary to make a decision, but we don't want to be wasting our time on information that really isn't that pertinent. So you said you have a list of
Yeah,
what
we
you
went
would.
through last week. You
I'll
had
read
a
it
list.
again, and if we want to make it briefer, or we can discuss that. So,
I mean, would you like me to read off to you what it was we were looking to submit for those plans? It may be
no,
helpful to start there. No? Okay.
why don't I say what we were looking for, and if you don't agree with it, just raise, just bring it up. Okay.
What page is that list?
Well, this is my, these are my notes. Sorry. And again, feel free to pipe in. This isn't the list. These were just some of the things I have. So preliminary architectural plans stamped and signed, elevations for all the buildings, heights, measurements, heights, floor plans, not necessarily sections, but information explaining exterior building materials. Some of this information, again, as you say, we have. For instance, on the cottages, I don't think we have that level of information on the condo buildings.
And we're happy to provide that information as part of this packet.
Thank you. In past iterations, we have received charts that show clearly the number of units, the number of bedrooms, the amount of square footage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In this particular packet, we got one based on the 92-unit plan, not the 100 that we asked for. So ideally, we would get that kind of chart again, giving us the unit square footages, all that kind of information in tabular form, or all on one plan page. How does everyone prefer it?
I like a chart.
Chart?
Yeah.
I mean, they have the template. It's been floating around. The floor plan should include a unit number for each condominium's unit so that the initial proposed affordable units can easily be identified and reviewed by the board and ultimately the subsidizing agency. The affordable,
Can I break in right there?
sure.
So I did have this discussion with Mr. Marchant, and this is generally something that's within the exclusive jurisdiction of the subsidizing agency. We're happy to provide you a proposed affordable unit location plan as part of this submittal, but we can't be held to it because once the process is complete, we have to go back to the subsidizing agency for final approval, and during that process, the subsidizing agency is going to tell us whether or not the plan we give them is sufficient or whether they want to see changes to it.
I think we were just concerned that all these subsidized units were not going to show up in the basement. So if you're putting them above grade, I can't imagine they're going to.
We'll show you a plan that intersperses, the different affordable units throughout the project.
Right.
Recognizing that, we have to do a program that has to be approved by the subsidizing agency.
Right.
Okay, Ed, can you speak to that point, please?
Paul is correct. The identification and location of the affordable units is considered to be a housing policy matter. And there was a decision, the Amesbury case, which said ZBAs do not have final say on certain housing policy issues. So what developers do is they designate the proposed locations of the affordable units. Even though the subsidizing agency has final say on many 40B projects I've worked on, if a board has questions about those locations, it's often discussed. And that's a common occurrence. But Attorney Haverty is absolutely right. Ultimately, the agencies say, that's our turf.
All right, so does that pertain also to the notion of pro rata distribution of the units? In other words, can all the affordable units be studios?
No. There has to be a reasonably pro rata distribution of units. Again, that's considered a housing policy issue, but like most business, it depends upon how reasonable those applications are.
So if we had,
If the board felt it was totally unreasonable, you would raise that issue in your decision,
Right.
knowing that ultimately the subsidizing agency still has the final say. But you
Okay.
would still note it.
all right, so again, I don't think it's an unreasonable request to have the floor plans include a unit number for each condominium unit so that the initial proposed affordable units can easily be identified. And ultimately, I would think the subsidizing agency would want that as well, but we don't have to talk about that.
The subsidizing agency requires that as part of the final
All right.
approval process.
Okay.
Right, and of course, the affordable lots have been identified on the cottage units. You've had that, you can review that. And the only way to simplify the identification of the units that will be affordable in the condominiums is to number each unit.
Right.
as well.
Although I don't think we have an updated plan that shows the
No.
affordable units on the 92-unit plan, right?
No, definitely. Oh, on the houses?
On the houses.
I don't
don't
know
think
that the
so.
houses were ever.
They were a long time ago,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but we haven't seen an updated plan in a long time.
So
The
so that is
cottages.
something that we're happy to submit as part of what we're proposing.
The floor plan should include room dimensions. Some plans do. Again, a lot of this pertains to the condominium buildings because we don't have that information.
If it's scale plans, the dimensions are less critical. The board, given that they were sketch plans before, it was very difficult to determine what the actual dimensions of those units were.
Yeah, I'm not critically concerned about unit dimensions other than,
It's more about the scale of the building, right? The massing of the building that you're
Yeah.
looking at is
we definitely want heights noted.
heights, overall widths.
I mean, we haven't had a chance to talk about our role as the HDC, if you will, at all on the newly proposed condominium buildings. So we're gonna have to do that in our deliberations,
Right.
and it will just become part of the condition that, correct?
Right.
So, I mean, again, if I were an applicant, I would want to keep the dialogue going so that we could talk about it, but if you don't want to, so be it. And maybe you will after we get all this new information on the 11th. So, I mean, the only critical issue on the dimensions is that the bedrooms meet minimum requirements, correct? But that's not
But that's up to
really
them.
our purview?
Right, that's a building
Code
department
matter.
issue, yeah.
And the board has no authority to waive building code requirements.
Right.
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 I'm going to skip that one because I don't think we have, I mean, again, if we were to, let's say, just as a hypothetical, we approve a plan that hasn't been 100% vetted in terms of egress and light and ventilation requirements, I mean, that's not really on us, is it?
So under Chapter 40B, the process that the board goes through is an approval of conceptual preliminary plans. Every time there's a 40B development throughout the state, a board, and when they grant a comprehensive permit, will include a condition that requires the submittal of detailed construction plans that has all of this information, and you have the opportunity to review those plans, and you have your building inspector, planner, whoever, that the board would generally have review something like that, to make sure that they actually comply with your approval and applicable laws.
Okay, fair enough.
So
So
any
I-
decision you issue can have a condition that says, final plans shall be submitted that address X, Y, and Z, and that's perfectly acceptable.
Okay. Did you want to talk about that, Ed?
It'd be somewhat repetitive, but there are a number of steps in the 40B process. Once a comprehensive permit becomes final, i.e. it's not appealed or any appeals are resolved, the applicant then has to submit a final approval application to the subsidizing agency. The subsidizing agency wants to know what changes may have been made during the public hearing. There are always changes made during the public hearing, but the subsidizing agency is obligated to determine whether or not it can make the same findings that it did in issuing the project eligibility letter. Then the applicant would normally prepare construction documents, and the responsibility of the building inspector is twofold: to review for compliance with code and to review for compliance to the plans that are referenced in the comprehensive permit decision. So I'm not concerned, I don't think the board should be concerned about getting very detailed in terms of code requirements.
Yeah,
It's something they have to comply with the code. The architect will have to
okay.
certify that.
Scratch that. We don't, yeah, I sort of scratched that particular number anyway. Okay. So again, back onto the chart idea, table and/or charts, just showing the total percentage of habitable net square footage for the cottage homes and condo homes, representing the proposed affordable units. We have stated in the past that we expect a pro rata distribution of units and bedrooms, and basically the square footage as well. Now, I'm not saying we're demanding that it has to be perfect, but again, what we're concerned about is we want to see that the distribution is relatively equitable. In other words, again, as an example, all the affordable units aren't studios. This is, again, primarily on the condo units. The houses are the houses.
Understood, and we know that whatever we propose in terms of the location of the affordable units has to be approved by the subsidizing agency, and they're going to be looking for an equitable arrangement there as well, so
Right. So
we understand.
We can get that out of the way here. All right, so preliminary engineering plans should provide sufficient information for the board and town departments to review whether the proposed water, sewer, and storm drainage plans are adequate and achievable. There are many outstanding questions, obviously, with the 92-unit plan because we don't have any of that information yet. I'm a little confused or just don't understand how we're going to get anybody to review those because if we close the hearing on the 11th, we can't get any new input, correct? So, sorry, right, that's another little wrinkle that I didn't know about, and I just want to be clear on. When we're having our deliberations, we could ask the applicant if they would be willing to reopen the hearing, and then this process doesn't start over again. It would be probably just on a specific item. Okay. All right, that's good to know.
So, Mr. Chairman, for the record, our position is that with regard to water, sewer, and drainage, those issues, they fundamentally don't change between a 92-unit and a 100-unit project that's already been submitted. So we're not proposing to submit additional details at this time. We're certainly happy to accept a condition that requires, this information to be submitted as part of final plans, and that can be subject to administrative review.
Why, I'm just curious about this, why have we been talking about sewer, water, and engineering up to this point if we don't really have any? Yeah, I thought we did. So we're still going to be the water commissioners. We're still going to be the sewer commissioners. We're still going to be the, not the storm drainage commissioner, because there isn't one, but.
Correct.
Or the fire.
Yeah.
So how do we
Well,
go?
for instance, for sewer, there's going to have to be more dialogue that goes on between, the engineering folks from the developers team and the sewer director for the town and the consulting engineers for the town, Weston and Sampson. Those aren't going to be secret communications that result in some sort of backroom deal. It would hopefully be something that is a productive dialogue, leads to an agreed approach, and then the town sewer engineering consultants would propose how to condition, the sewer connection in connection with your approval. That's what I would envision happening. That dialogue is going to have to take place, forthwith, if you're going to end up having to close the hearing on the 11th. So hopefully, as a result of that process, we'd have something workable that would be agreed to by the developer. Or if not, at least that we know we've narrowed the issues and the consultants have been able to suggest conditions to you that you would then impose on the permit, acting as the local sewer board. Same thing for water.
What about storm drainage? We specifically talked about certain aspects of the storm drainage as it was presented to us before, i.e. no storm drainage in the buffer area.
Yeah, storm drainage should really be part of this process.
mean,
I would hope that some type of submission can go on, and perhaps Mr. Chestia can look at it. I don't know who's been looking at it so far, but, it's a big component of this. Goes
Well, it is a
into-
big component, and if you don't meet the the 95% recharge, et cetera, we can't, we're not equipped to make that determination, I don't think. I don't feel
So-
equipped.
Fundamentally, the storm drainage really shouldn't change significantly. You're talking about a reduction in impervious area between the 100-unit and the 92-unit project. So if anything, the storm drainage is only going to become easier to handle rather than more difficult. My understanding is that there's been a thorough review of the stormwater for the 100-unit project. We don't intend to keep the hearing process open to have another drainage review on a 92-unit project where the impacts have actually been reduced. We don't think that's necessary. Now, I understand that you may have some concerns with regards to that there's aspects of how it might be addressed that may change. We're more than happy to have you take a look at the difference between that as part of a review of final plans. We'll accept a condition that requires that sort of review, but it's just not feasible to get that information to you within the timeframes we have left for this hearing process.
That's why we wanted more.
Don't do that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I didn't, I must have missed it in going through all of these pages, but where is the thorough review of the
Right.
stormwater on the 100-unit project? Do you guys have any idea?
Having just been brought in, I can't respond to that.
Maybe you can ask Don or,
Hi, Don Bracken. Throughout the process, we have been in correspondence with Chessier several different times, and Ellen has been copied on that as well. We did come to an agreement with Chessier, that we agreed this certain system would meet the Stormwater Management Act. We had discussed it at some of the meetings. So the 100-unit plan incorporates what I believe we agreed on, and the updated drainage report on the 100-unit plan as well.
so is that, I'm trying to think, what is it called so I can look at it?
There's really not a specific name for it, but it's easy enough to describe. It's catch basins or grit separators, and the catch basins also have overflow biofilters. Yes,
Okay.
yeah, and
So
so,
is the plan that's in our packet?
yeah, if you look at the 100-unit
Which
set
one is
in the
that?
detail sheets, it
20
describes the
of
system.
Part
Yeah.
one.
And Don,
Well,
you're
that's
you're
clear.
saying, or the applicant's saying you cannot get take those components and overlay them onto the 92-unit plan, just so we can see it?
Yeah, because.
I mean, the
Well, we
componentry
can-
is there.
Yeah, we can show it in a general way, but not with all the details and calculations, obviously,
Well, what if ultimately it's proven that it doesn't meet the criteria, it doesn't meet the, I guess that would come out in the wash later on by what I don't like about that is, are we kicking the can down the road to some other?
October 25th.
To identify what Mr.
But
Chesney
that can't be 100 units. No,
on stormwater.
that's 156.
No, the 156 had the condos up here.
Okay, so if I heard Don correctly, we can get,
No.
basically the 100-unit plan does show everything, including details, right? but the details are going to be the same details that are going to be used on this plan. When I'm talking about how the cutaway of the tree and the,
Where the location of the storm.
It's going to be the same method.
Right.
So
Right, you can-
if he reviews this and says it's acceptable, you can.
That's what's just.
well, no, what I'm saying,
So-
that's
so-
not where I was going. I was going with
Location of
why,
the Stormwater facilities on the plan. So we can show you the location of the stormwater facilities for the 92-unit plan with what we will submit. What you're not going to get is a full stormwater set of calculations, that you've already received on the 100-unit plan, that really isn't going to change anything but favorably when you reduce the amount of impervious on the site.
Right, I'm just asking where are those calculations, like where was
I-
it submitted so I can,
Don't know.
like, I mean, I have it's 1,100 pages. Like, do you remember, like,
It was in the last package.
in the last one we just had?
It's this.
I'd say it tends to be a very thick booklet when you're talking about stormwater calculations, which is why it's just not sufficient.
don't you have to, obviously, you would ultimately have to produce that work for the next level. We would arguably condition it that X, Y, and Z has to look at this and,
Yep, so you could you can include a condition that requires us to include, as part of the final plan submittals, updated stormwater calculations that demonstrate compliance with the DEP stormwater management policy.
But I do think it's important to see where the systems will be.
Absolutely.
And how they
And that can be
impact,
provided on
and
the
how they
plans.
impact buffer zones and, because I think drainage was a big
the
concern
hun- the
from
100
the
unit-
public's safe,
right.
yeah, from the public's perspective.
This is it, I think. This is
That's
it.
definitely it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
but
that's part of
isn't it that this plan though?
No, this is in the packet from the other day.
No, but it's the same plan, right? Yeah.
And again,
That's the 100
we got
unit
so
plan.
much stuff the other day that it's,
That's the,
so what you're saying is you're not going to give us all of this again?
We'll give you a plan that shows the location of the stormwater infrastructure.
So that'll look like this.
that'll look like this plan, Don, right? That shows the, I can't read any of this.
Wait a minute.
Subsurface,
I see you, by the way.
it's this plan that you're gonna provide us can you come up here and look?
Yeah.
Or- Sorry. It's hard to,
From the 100 units, that's.
this is from the 100-unit set, so this, you're gonna show this kind of information,
Yes.
but just not all the follow-up calculations.
Correct.
Now, I have a question for Ed and George.
Exactly.
If someone in the audience, some group, some person, the town of Nantucket even wants to contest or appeal the comprehensive permit, which we might issue, based on stormwater, how can they make that assessment without this information being part of the comprehensive permit?
I think it comes down to the terms of the conditions that you draft. And I think the conditions are going to be very clear, as Paul Haverty just said, that the system as designed must comply with all applicable DEP standards. I know storm drainage is always a sensitive issue, particularly where you have very high water tables. This site, in certain respects, is a little simpler than other sites, but it's still a very important issue. But I think you will be protected as long as you draft that condition carefully.
Okay, George, do you want to talk about this as well?
Well, I just want to distinguish between things in your purview and subject to conditions. So the only thing that those would come down to is you're not permitted, and it kind of goes to your question about what would be appealable and what not. You're not permitted to take information, close the hearing, and then impose conditions for any subsequent required approval that you choose to do. The only types of, subject to conditions that you can impose would be the grant of the subsidy by the subsidizing agency, the issuance of the final approval by the subsidizing agency. Particularly with respect to this one, the securing of the approval of any state or federal agency with respect to the project which the applicant must obtain before building, provided, however, that the board shall not delay or deny an application on the grounds that any state or federal approval has not been obtained. So the meaning of that is you will condition your permit on the requisite state approvals, such as DEP approval of the stormwater management plan. But that's a separate issue from something that you really need to address in your public hearings, which would be any waivers applicable to stormwater issues and, local zoning bylaws on those issues. So you want to be able to conduct that in this hearing process. So I definitely agree that, whatever's approvable by the state, you can't delay your process waiting for that, but you will have that in your permit. As Ed had said, that protects you, that they have to comply with those requirements. You have it in your permit, but you've got to address, you can't have a subject to condition in your permit that says, well, subject to, compliance with ZBA, zoning bylaw X. You've got to address that in this hearing. So if there are issues that you need to address in terms of stormwater issues that are in your local purview, you really need to have those come out of this process. So hopefully, the details that are being provided and the analysis that's already gone on and can continue to go on between Mr. Chessier and Mr. Bracken can lead you to a final result on that.
Okay, I'm going to, only on this one issue, somebody wants to say something. Hopefully not everybody.
There is no sign-off in the record from Chestnut for this that I could find. I went through all that 1,100 pages. So it's nice to hear that somebody feels they have a sign-off on somebody, but it's not there in the record. And may I suggest that you really need to have your experts take a look at the papers that are coming. So they're going to file all this stuff on April 11th. You don't really have a sign-off from Chessier. Maybe he'll sign off on it, maybe he won't. You shouldn't be taking their word for it. You need the time to give it to someone like him, and there are other experts who ought to be consulted. So I would respectfully suggest that the timeline that they're talking about, in view of what they've just said, doesn't work for you. You need an opportunity to get this material in and then get your experts who've already been engaged, already involved, so we don't have a lot of time finding people, to see whether this stuff does meet this so-called agreement.
Thank you. Did you want to say something different?
No, I'm just, Dave Iverson, South Shore Road. It's just concerning, Ed kind of minimized it, that they're paving or close to 6 acres of impervious surface on this plan, yet I'm just concerned that the stormwater plan is going to get lost in the smoke and mirror show, and that really the attention it's due is paid to it, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Did you want to respond?
I can wait until they've had their opportunity.
So, Bruce Perry, South Shore Road. I just wondered when you're going to take comments on what they have submitted for a stormwater plan, because I had some comments from the last meeting where they submitted a plan for the 100 units.
All right, well, we're not doing that right this second. I think what I'd like to do is get through the list of things that we'd like, and
Just so you know, I do have some comments on that when you get down to it.
okay.
And Mr.
Thank
Chairman,
you.
can I try to clarify the process of what we are doing here? And I probably didn't do a good enough job explaining it from the beginning, what our position is. What we are suggesting is to try to get to the board sufficient information that if the board decides it wants to base its decision on a 92-unit plan, whatever direction you go from that, but we're just trying to get, the information necessary to support a decision consistent with what is required under the regulations at 760 CMR 56.052. So we're not looking to have lengthy discussions, lengthy reviews over anything that's submitted. What's being submitted is really, to make sure that your record is complete. Reviews have happened throughout the long hearing process, and changes to the concept plan don't necessarily have major changes on certain issues, and again, our position is stormwater is one of them. I know that there's been a lot of talk about the quantum of information that has just been recently submitted to the board, and we just wanted to make it clear that none of that is new information. That's all information that has been previously submitted
That's not
and has just been,
No.
That's not
well, that's
Maybe you were told
my
that.
understanding.
No.
And that has simply been put into a format in which, it's all in one place.
No, there's stuff in here we've never seen before.
Yeah.
That's
Anyway,
not.
we don't have to
Sure.
quibble about
I'm
that
just-
because
Sure.
it's
But
just,
but
it's
what
just not
I just
true,
wanted to
but-
make it clear to the board that if the board, is not intending to move forward on a process in which you want to make a decision on a 92-unit project, we can forget all of this.
No, we're trying to get there.
No, I just
So
wanted to make
you
it
don't have
clear in
to-
terms of how much additional review is necessary.
Well, we're trying to do a good job here.
I understand
We're
that
charged
perfectly.
with a certain thing, and we've been presented with other stormwater, if we're going to talk about the stormwater. We just want to be making an informed decision. It's sort of hard to make an informed decision. Number one, when you get a document dump on you the day before a meeting, it doesn't probably 3/4 of it doesn't pertain to what we asked for. And now we're being told we're going to get the same dump probably, or similar. So, yeah,
No, that's-
we have some concern about that, but I'm going to get by that.
Mr. Chairman, to be fair, I've said exactly the opposite. We're trying to minimize the amount of information that is going to be submitted to you.
Yeah, but then
But I
we
think
have it. Don't go there. Anyway, let's move on through the
Well, I think
list,
Zach
and then.
wants to talk. Jock,
Jock,
sorry.
go ahead.
I keep calling him Zach.
Mr. Chairman, Jacques Simicki. We've never talked about in the stormwater systems, the storm tree system, the tree system that they're using for bioretention or filtration system. I believe that was probably on the agenda when we had to move from the auditorium to another venue, and so we just never got around to talking about it. And there's a lot of information that should be shared about that.
Well,
Yeah.
just to be clear, we don't have the authority to make the applicant give us more time. We are under certain pressures to either deny the application or to issue a comprehensive permit with conditions. So we're going to do our best to get, I think, to door number 2.
In a conversation I had with the DEP stormwater guy, he said that what we should be asking for in the hearing is proof, scientific proof and certification of these systems that are acceptable by state agencies. And he said that doesn't happen very often. And I believe with the storm tree system, they would be hard put to show that system works. And we're talking about stormwater here, but actually I'm sort of talking about impervious surface in the wellhead recharge district, which is something else that needs to be examined. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll be real quick. I just want to address the storm tree issue. The storm tree issue, we're not even taking any credit for nutrient removals for the storm tree system because there are some approvals, but the state hasn't given it any definite approvals for certain removal rates. We already designed a system with catch basins and oil grit separators and subsurface leaching systems that technically meet the stormwater management regulations. We added the storm trees as a low-impact development addition for additional treatment. So we would meet the Stormwater Management Act without the storm trees. I just want to make that point.
Thank you. I would like to ask the applicant, obviously this is a hot button item. We're not equipped to make, assessments. So all I'm going to ask is that you consider the notion of additional time, you don't have to answer now, to take this, so we can have at least one discussion about it. Once we get the plan, once we get the new 92 plan. Can we move off that issue? Do you guys want to talk about it more?
I think
No.
somebody's got to reach out to Chesia and see where he is.
Yeah.
I haven't read every email that goes between Don and, so I don't know where Chesia is in relation to what Dawn's done lately.
I don't either. I cannot, not tell a lie.
If you'd like, I can give you some information.
Sure,
So,
go ahead.
right before the last hearing, Mr. Chessie had touched base with me, and I believe Don had emailed him. We got the set of plans for the last hearing, which was the 100-unit, very detailed engineering plans. Chessie had touched base with me after the last hearing the next day, or I emailed him, I said, as of now, the extension deadline is April 4th. He needed time. He said he didn't have time to review the new set of plans that Don had emailed him, the new stormwater report as of yet. So, but he is aware, and he does have those documents. He's had them for about a week. So, after this hearing happens, and depending on the outcome, I will recontact him and let him know, and Don, I'm sure, will as well, what the next set of deadlines are. But he is aware, as of the other day, the deadline for the close of public hearing was next week. If that changes, he'll have additional time. But he has those most recent set of plans and the most recent stormwater report that Don submitted a week ago, or the 19th.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Look, I really sympathize with the timeline you guys are working with, and it is completely unfair to you. But what Ms. Antonetti basically said is that John Chesia hasn't even had time to look at the 100-unit layout design. And now they're going to give you the bare bones minimum of a completely different layout, which is essentially a sketch plan. I've been doing this, like you guys, for ages. Planning board, which you are acting as, for this particular waiver, would never, ever accept a sketch plan and say, we're going to deal with it later after the public hearing. Don knows this. These guys know it. I'm kind of flabbergasted, but it's all under the guise of this timeline that we're dealing with. We would never be like this. They would give you the complete detailed plans of the new layout and allow your peer review to happen. And then the peer review would consult with Dawn during the public hearing process. I mean, that's how it works. But now we're just up against this ridiculous timeline. And that's where we're completely breaking down. And it does a disservice to the board. It does a disservice to the community. And quite frankly, it does a disservice to Nantucket. This is a sole source aquifer. This is upgrading a Myacomet pond. And it's completely ridiculous as Nantucketers that you guys are doing this.
Thank you. Don't do that, please. Okay. So we seem to have a little sticking point on the drainage.
So, Mr. Chairman, what I would suggest is there is stormwater calculations that have been submitted to Mr. Chesia. They are for a development that has more impervious surface than what would be the result of the 92-unit development. I think that if he reviews those stormwater calculations, certainly, and he determines that they are acceptable, there shouldn't be much concern that the 92-unit development would be different. We will provide the plans that show the locations of any stormwater facilities, and that's as far as we're willing to go on this.
Well, let's start there. So if I'm hearing you, I think I can probably see my way if we have the same same level of detail on the engineering plan that shows the catch basins, the trees, the this, the that, all the componentry, but the calculations in and of themselves.
How do we know if the size of those units is large enough to deal with it? We're going to compare it to the 100-unit plan and just say, okay, it's about the same size or a little smaller, or?
Well, I would
don't
assume the
think
componentry would have to be exactly the same size as the 100. I'm just spitballing.
I know,
here.
but there's no, we don't have, I mean, we still have the buffer, but I can't, I have to pull out the 100-unit plan.
I don't, we haven't heard from Chesia yet. There's a bit of a disconnect between Chesia and Dawn. What Dawn says is approvable, Chesia doesn't feel that's correct. And I've never read anywhere where he said that he agrees with you that your system is adequate. The previous system, I don't know anything about the most recent. So
Well,
At some point, our consultant has to tell us that the technology that you're proposing
When was that?
is
2
going to be
weeks
okay.
ago?
I don't have a problem. I mean, once the technology is okayed by our consultant, you know, you can figure out if you have enough leaching or however much impervious surface. That's basic math.
Here it
What
is.
has to happen is,
We-
our guy
we-
has to sign off on the basic technology.
We actually do have that, Jeff. It's in an email from him that Eleanor was copied on. We can get that to the board.
Okay.
We gave them, you know, a prototype design, and that's what he came back, and that's what we based the 100-unit design on with those calculations.
I haven't seen that.
That's the.
Yeah.
It's probably in the, it's probably
It
in
wouldn't
there,
be- it
but-
probably
and I
wouldn't be in
can't
your
believe
packet.
you didn't read
Yeah.
all 1,100 pages last
But-
night. I mean, you got it at 5:30.
It's not in the packet. I read it, it's not in the
Slacker.
packet.
I guess what I'm just trying to figure out is when you take this plan, I'm sorry, it has my scratches on it. Like, how do you find all these subsurface drainage utilities? How do you fit all that on this plan? When,
Well, that's what they would
totally
have to
different
show
plan.
us.
I know, but how do we confirm that it's the quantity if we don't have the calculations?
It's a good question, but
mean,
I don't know
understand
how we
we're
would do
supposed to
it.
make that determination without calculations.
Well,
The
we,
amount of impervious surface will be reduced.
Right,
But
but
you're
if
saying-
you-
No, that's
but
not what
you're-
she's
but you're
saying.
I'm not
saying
saying
that,
that.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you're saying that, you're asking us to take a leap of faith, that when you go from 100 to 92, that it's exactly going, I mean, this isn't, we have to approve a plan. Like, I'd like to see a plan. We had a meeting where we had two design group, not to rehash history, but we had two, I'm gonna do it for a second. We had two design groups that people participated in, came up with this plan. Then we asked for some things, we come back, now we're talking about the 100 plan, but we've got the 92 plan, so that meeting is a waste. And then okay, we're gonna go with the 100 plan, now you guys come in, we're gonna go back to the 92, like, and then you're saying, well, we're not gonna give you guys any more time, make a decision. I would like to see what it is you're proposing on a plan, not 1,100 pages with 3,000 different plans, and looking at, well, this plan that has condos over here, look at the trees on that, and look at the landscaping on the one that has 100.
Right.
Just one set of plans. Even if it's, you know, a new packet that's 200 pages, that's manageable. But this, I mean, the landscape plan, just, I'm going off topic, but the landscape plan, I know you guys are saying, oh, well, we submitted it in July. We had like one conversation about it. That's,
and I'm not sure we saw that, but the
Well, we-
landscape plan we have in there is related to the 150.
that's what I'm
56
saying.
unit,
It does, it's
right.
not even
Anyway,
relevant.
let's, that's what we're trying to get to, a
Right.
list of information that we need. We need the stormwater information. Obviously, the more information we get, the more we're gonna be comfortable
And
with.
I hear them keep saying
If we're
they're not
uncomfortable with it,
providing
we
more.
can always deny the permit.
Okay.
I mean, that is still an option.
Part of my concern is where you're showing some of these subsurface drainage areas are now lots. They're cottage lots on the 92-unit plan. So where does all that stuff go?
Yeah, well, Don, you just said you can fit you're going to give us a plan that shows the componentry in the plan, on the plan, correct?
Yes, it's gonna, the intent is, the plan that you showed me a few minutes ago, Lisa, was the October plan that comprised of like 3 sheets. It had an overall plan.
Right.
You could see everything, you could see where the drainage was, where the subsurface areas were. That plan was the one with the rain gardens and the buffer areas, which we took out under the new 100-unit plan. But that's what we would be intending to submit, you know, by the 11th. It's something, so you can visually see. And now with the new layout with the island, I think when you look at it, you'll see, well, there's space. If they have to move things around, they can.
It doesn't look like there's this much space. And that would mean, I mean, that whole island is getting brush cut and cleared and not kept as native material.
don't
Well,
think it
when we
was ever
spoke the last time, I
intended
thought
as
the
native.
last meeting, we talked about some of this being left natural.
I don't remember that.
But
Yeah,
I don't know, it
yeah.
just doesn't look like enough space to me.
Well,
Because we don't have a plan, so.
I mean, we don't have.
All right, but that,
look
we're
at it.
trying to
that's what
get to
we'll have
the
do.
plan.
That's what we'll have to get to
Well-
that point.
Let's move off to drainage. We can come back to it if we need to. Obviously, if we're not comfortable with the amount of information we get, or uncomfortable acting on it, we'll deal with it.
Okay.
Also in the context of conditions and granting or not granting waivers.
Right,
When you're looking at a requested waiver relevant to that,
right,
you don't have the information to then you just have to.
right.
Can we,
Okay.
so maybe we should go through the list quickly, and then maybe we could concentrate on.
I thought, I was
I know,
trying to go
I know,
through
but I was gonna
quickly.
say- and then
That sounded like a criticism.
No, I
And
derailed.
go
It was me.
through, and then go through the waiver list, because I think
Well,
that's an important thing to go through.
You gotta do this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's
I know.
finish
Do this
this.
quickly
Let's
and then
finish
get to the
this, and, yeah, the problem, of course, with the waivers is they're not necessarily all pertinent to,
So, Mr. Chairman, one of the things we're more than happy to provide as part of the submittal for the meeting on the 11th is an updated waiver list.
thank you. Can I ask a favor? Because we've gotten just an umpteenth number of them. I believe there were 2 sets of waiver
Right, there
requests
were.
in here. Can you put waiver,
Can you put a date on
date,
them?
a date and
92 unit
specifying
concept
it's
plan.
the 92-unit
About-
plan?
Of the entire 1,000-page packet, there's about 6 pages that actually have a date on it.
Well, and again, the
Yeah.
charts of the single-family homes, put the date and the plan. Now,
Well,
arguably, we're only gonna be talking about the
Right.
92-unit plan, but just in case we backslide, let's just have that out there,
Well, what
okay?
about if they just added a column where it was original submission, 100 unit, 92 units, so we can compare?
So you'd like a waiver list that compares, excuse me, that compares what was previously requested and what is being requested
care
under the.
what-
I don't care,
92
I don't really care
Well,
what
only
they,
if we, well, that's assuming that we're
Well-
gonna stick with a 92 unit plan. It'd be
Yeah.
interesting
So we
to see
need-
what the 100
well,
unit plan had
they've
next
offered
to
up
it.
to 92,
But
so
they offered up
let's.
100 last time,
I mean,
and then
I'm
92
so-
before that.
I don't know. I don't wanna get 4 different charts.
Yeah, there shouldn't be like a
No,
40
no,
page
one
buffet.
92-unit waiver list.
Okay, so we're not dating each waiver list.
No, I don't wanna see the
I
100,000
wouldn't mind seeing
pages.
the 100 unit waiver list.
I think they want something
In
that just
comparison.
covers the 92.
Why?
Correct, Mr.
Why?
Chairman, you want something that just covers the 92, discusses
That's what I
nothing
want,
else.
but that's not necessarily what everybody wants,
okay.
so if you want the 100 as
I
well?
just want information for the plan that we're gonna be talking about.
Are we, if we're definitely voting on the night, but I thought it was, I don't know, I just feel like we have more information on the 100 unit plan, so it's easier to make a decision on.
It's
So-
a
so-
legitimate
I
concern.
I
think-
get where you're coming from, Lisa, because it seems to me the last 3 weeks have been really
I agree.
a big, huge
Waste of time.
And,
Last
you know,
meeting was a waste of time,
last
and to
meeting
give
was
us
a waste
one
of
meeting to go
time.
through all this is really frustrating.
Understood.
You know,
So,
And it's
you
not
know,
inconceivable that next, you know, on
meeting,
the 11th, you know, they might have changed their mind again and said, you know what?
or we don't feel like we have enough
So-
information, and they say
So,
we're
Mr.
not gonna give
Chairman,
you an extension.
I guess, again, I was
Trust-
less than precise in how I described what we're proposing at the
Go ahead.
beginning of this. My client's preferred development right now would be the 100-unit plan, and if you want to make a decision on that and forget about the 92 units, then, you know, that's certainly within your purview. But the feedback that was received is that the 92-unit concept plan was preferable for the board, even if you don't necessarily agree with that 100%, and that you wanted to have enough information in your record to support a decision being based upon that.
That's
So
correct.
any discussion that we're having tonight about submittal of additional information and extending the hearing process for another week is based upon the idea that you want to move forward and issue a decision on a 92-unit plan.
That's what
So
I
if-
would like to do.
So if we're going to give you this information, that's what we expect you to do. We reserve any rights that we have. If you issue a decision that, you know, we really, you know, think is not economic, that's something that we can't live with, you know, we'll do what we have to do. But I think, you know, I wanted just to make it clear that by extending the hearing for that additional week, providing this information, we are presuming you are going to move forward and make a decision, whatever it is, on a 92-unit plan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Having said that, I personally think the 92 is preferable to the 100 to be talking about. We don't, if everybody feels differently,
I think it is.
and we
I'm
want to
just-
make a
I'm just-
decision tonight, or close the
No.
hearing tonight,
No, I don't want to do that. I'm just
you're frustrated.
frustrated that we're going to get this information on the 10th, and then we have one 3-hour meeting on a Thursday afternoon to write a decision.
It's a 2-hour meeting, because we have had at least an hour of
Yeah,
other
it's just-
stuff,
it's
and I'm
really-
leaving at 4,
it's
so.
really frustrating, and
It's ludicrous to
it
me.
is. It's
And I think,
crazy.
again, it's disingenuous and disrespectful, but
Totally.
I'm willing to move forward because we don't seem to, you know, I can sit
Cooperative.
here and publicly shame the applicant, it doesn't seem to matter.
Right.
So let's move on.
Mr. Chairman, I have to object to that. That's not appropriate.
It's not appropriate giving us this kind of, no time to review stuff either. So anyway, let's move on. Number 8, or I don't even know what number we're on. An understandable narrative explanation along with graphics that clarifies the grades and access for the proposed patios. I don't even know if that's appropriate anymore.
Well, that would be, I think, for the
HTC
buildings,
part,
the
right?
buildings that were partially raised, if that's even appropriate.
No,
We know the
that's not
architecture
part of
anymore.
that, so forget that. Again, just, we need a level of information that you would have to submit to the HTC, and it's not a huge burden, it's just, you know, there's a checklist, materials, and some of this information, again, is provided for the cottages. Materials, siding, roofing, trim, paint colors, blah, blah, blah. You know it's
We're not going to
necessary.
do separate paint colors for every unit, though. We talked about the
Yeah, just-
variation.
Yeah, we're not getting into the details.
So we can provide that
Yeah,
information.
thank you.
You're welcome.
An updated,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
an updated landscape plan related to the 92-unit
For
plan.
the entire site.
For the entire site that shows shade trees, et cetera, walks, brick walk, whatever.
Materials.
Materials,
Any exterior, any lighting?
Yep, lighting. Back to landscaping for 1 second. With a typical cottage home plan and a typical condominium building plan. And in the 92-unit plan, there were 3 types of buildings. There were also duplexes. So a typical,
Can I ask for one other thing?
Sure.
Just with the way the condos were located in the 92-unit plan, I think they should do a plan of that whole area with all those buildings together, not a typical, because they're different sizes. They face different directions.
Sure.
Entries are different.
okay, fair enough.
So that has to be a
So-
blow-up.
So I'm not sure we're going to be able to get that information to you in that time frame. I think this is something that it could be appropriately addressed through a condition. When I represent boards, and I do it throughout the state, I have a very detailed landscaping condition, because very frequently in 40B developments, the landscaping aspect of the proposal is underdeveloped throughout the hearing process. It's usually something that doesn't get considered really until the very end of the process, and then someone says, oh, what about the landscaping? I can certainly propose a draft condition before the next hearing that you can take a look at and see if that satisfies your concerns as to what would need to be submitted as part of the final
Well,
plans.
I would much prefer that you submit the plans. So do you need more time to produce them?
It's an issue. The timing issue is April 11th is going to be the last date that my clients are willing to continue this process. Yet again, this is
I don't- that
conceptual information, Mr. Chairman.
Well, when we
that-
did our last 40B, we had a landscape plan, and we
So-
talked about caliper of trees and.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
I
you,
don't- but-
I know you've come into this process late, but
I have.
we've gone through a number of meetings that it's been clear that this land is environmentally sensitive, and this is probably more unique than what you've worked on in other 40Bs. And we would like to see a more detailed plan, not more than what a planning board would require. I know we can't require more than that, but it's a sensitive area, and we would like to see this detail.
And what I'm
offered.
suggesting is that we would accept a condition of any approval that listed exactly what you wanted to see in terms of types, species, locations as part of a condition
Okay.
of any approval. We would
All right,
accept
so
that.
to the extent that we could say we want to see 2 8-inch caliper shade trees on each lot, I mean, that kind of condition, we can do that?
And again, it's the specifics. I mean, if you're asking for something that goes way above and beyond, what would normally be required,
Well, how do
we
we-
may have a specific objection to that.
Yeah, that's fine. You can object to anything we want. We know that. We
Correct.
understand that. We don't have to talk about that anymore. We get it.
Yes, certainly. But that is certainly the type of condition that you could impose, to say, we want to see trees of X caliber located in these locations, only native plantings, nothing invasive, things of that nature.
Okay. George?
Yeah, I think that's requiring too much of you. The landscape plan that's just boilerplate part of this process.
I thought so.
If the only one if they can't give one that's at least of the detail of the 156 unit. I forget if they even had a landscaping plan for the 156.
They did for the,
Yeah,
that
I mean,
one, not
it's
the
100.
100 though, I don't think.
Yeah, you really need a landscape plan. I mean, the types of conditions you're really talking about for conditioning this project go to open space concerns, the use of, is there space for play area? Is there grounds for buffer zones for either stormwater management or the people on the site? What are the sightline distances to abutters? You have a unique area of town that you really do want a landscape plan as part of this process. Those are the kind of the big issues that you're really looking at on this project. A lot of the rest of the stuff, the way the law works, you're bound to a certain extent.
But
So
if they're
you're
not
really
will-
trying to you're looking at the site design. We keep going back to this issue. You're looking at this is like a site design review board in this case, and in the circumstance of this case, site design is really the crucial issue, and that's what you've heard from people who live in that area and people who care about long-term planning efforts is what type of site design are you looking at on this site, and to try to do that without a landscape plan, to look at what it is that you're doing, being asked to permit, that you really can't do. And it's way too much, in my opinion, for you to be becoming landscape architects and thinking about what trees you want planted where and the space that you want left open and how.
So how do we do that if they're not willing to provide that and,
I would
or an
hope
extension?
that they're going to provide a landscaping plan with sufficient detail, however they can come up with that by the 11th at least.
I mean, there was a plan for the 156. I don't quite understand why you can't morph it into the 92.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just spoke with my clients, and they said that they can provide that information.
Thank you.
If I'm going to make a prediction, once that's provided, this board is going to want to have a condition that actually addresses landscaping in more detail. And again, as long as it's reasonable, we're not going to object to it.
Thank you.
And I would actually agree, as long as, I know how important it is. It is not unusual to get a preliminary plan. 40Bs are based upon preliminary plans, but George Pucci talked about not being able to make a comprehensive permit subject to satisfaction of other conditions. I think how that condition gets drafted is the applicant has agreed to submit a final landscaping plan prepared by a registered landscape architect, identifying species, quantities, sizes, planting details, to be reviewed by the board.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, we would get another crack at the landscaping plan at some future date?
Let me address that, please, Ed. So essentially.
I don't mean that.
Yeah.
I don't mean
No,
that.
and I understand. I think it's a very good question, actually. And essentially, yes. It would not be the opening of a new public hearing. It would not be a new approval process. What it would be an administrative approval. You're going to have a process in which we are required to submit final plans. You are going to review those final plans and make a determination if they are consistent with what was previously submitted, plus your decision and its conditions and waiver decisions. So in that process, you are going to say, well, you submitted a more detailed landscape plan, but it didn't really comply with what we said we wanted in our decision. Therefore, you've got to go back to the drawing board and give us more.
All right, having said that, I think I would like to see as much detail as we can get to, because the landscaping is a critical part of any large-scale project or even a small project. So we don't, if you come in, and I'm not saying that this is going to be the case, but if you came in with, a barren wasteland with just grass and 4 trees on 13 and a half acres, that would be a problem. So we need to have some baseline to work from.
Certainly.
That we can base our decision on. So as opposed to saying, we'll kick that can down the road too. So hopefully you can get it. And I think we've made it clear we'd like it. And it's important.
One more clarification, the buffer. I think there has been some confusion about whether we leave it. I think one of the recommendations was we leave the buffer whatever is there, the native species, if we could just clarify that in the buffer, not describing any specific trees that are gonna be, but I think we're confused about whether it's gonna be planted or not. So
Which packet was the,
it's in the.
part, which part was the landscape plan in?
It's in the
Packet
first one, I
2,
think.
Packet
page
2?
6, no, sorry, packet 1, page
Yeah.
160.
I mean, again, there's a fair amount of detail already. So anyway, the applicant just said that they can get it to us. So let's,
And I believe I believe we agreed that the buffer was gonna remain
Natural.
natural.
Yeah.
That
Certainly
was-
the one at the road
Yeah,
and behind.
I think it should get left natural to the extent that it can.
yeah.
And then augmented to the extent that it should be.
Yeah, I think that's what we had talked
To
about.
Well
create
put.
to create a proper buffer zone between this thing and all the neighbors that are rightfully so interested in it.
okay. That's just a little extra guidance, and
All right, move on.
let's see if we can move on off the lighting plan is important. It's should be part of the landscape plan. If you're intending to put lighting in.
Yeah, and that's pretty detailed. It starts at page 163.
It's very
and
detailed.
It's,
So it
I
shouldn't-
don't remember ever seeing it before
No, we
this
didn't
tonight,
see it.
but,
We never
or
saw.
yesterday, but,
Okay.
But
We
this
have
is
the,
based on the old,
no, I know, I mean, they'd have to update it, but I'm just
yeah,
saying.
this is based on the
we haven't-
159.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
never saw this. Yeah.
Right, I know. That's-
we have the storage shed designs. We did talk at the last meeting about there should be some explanation how some reasonable accommodation will be made for homeowners selected in the initial lottery for the affordable units who may have a household member requiring reasonable accommodation. The applicant shall be responsible for the cost of any such reasonable accommodation. I don't think that's a big one. Outline building specifications should be submitted and explain any differences in equipment and finishes, including but not limited to HVAC equipment, appliances, flooring, cabinets, countertops, vanities, basement access, basement build-out, outdoor showers, storage sheds, parking spaces, etc., between the market and affordable cottages and market and affordable condominium units. Again, just by way of an example, an early submission on the plans, the affordable cottages did not have basement accesses. Later iterations, they did. We were promised that they would all have basement accesses, yet I believe in this packet, they don't have. So that just, all I'm saying is, again, it sort of speaks to the level of clarity in the packets that we receive. The information is all over the place. So I'm assuming that we are, on the cottages, we are going from the place, we have had discussions on the cottage designs, you know, that Chris and you guys participated in. That's what I'm thinking we're sort of using, not some old iteration that doesn't have basement access, probably didn't include our comments. And so just please, the information you give us, it's frustrating enough to try to get through it, but then when you're reading it and realizing it's not even pertinent, it's very frustrating. So are we using the cottages that we've talked about and modified? Yes? Okay.
Hearing yes.
So please have please have that information in the packet.
The other comment the board has made is that if the applicant intends to build out any areas in the basement, they need to show it now in these plans.
That's right.
The iteration that I'm talking about had those, but again, this didn't, all of them. So we need to have the real plans.
What, the spas?
No spas, there's none on a plan now, so we don't have to go there.
They're not doing those, okay.
Well, they're not.
Come back and ask for spas later.
Additional information should be provided for any proposed recreation building. The message was very clear that recreation building was way overdone. And we can possibly condition something, I assume, by limiting its square footage, limiting its gross floor area, et cetera.
But the footprint should be shown on the site plan for the 92-unit building.
Well, clearly, but
We have to
if
do
we're just
HDC
taking the
for it,
giant,
We have to do HDC,
Oh,
Yeah,
so we needed,
so we need
a design.
elevations and design and.
or we're gonna have to revisit it at a later.
There's no reason, I was just confused there when you referenced the recreation plan for the 156 unit proposal. We know that's not.
No,
We
that was
just
for the
never- We
100.
just never saw it
So you
again.
just need more details on what they intend to do on the 90.
There were lots of comments on that building
Then we
when we
just-
went through the 100.
Yeah, the
I don't-
92-unit building has a much,
It's much smaller footprint.
much smaller footprint for the,
Mm-hmm.
no one can see this, but it's much smaller than this.
Yeah, but we
Yeah.
just haven't seen.
Are they acknowledging what you're asking?
I don't know,
I think we need to look at, whether there is a difference between what was previously proposed and what the current proposal will be. If there is a difference, we will provide that information.
Wait, would it say that again?
So there's already been a proposal submitted with regard to the recreation building that's already been seen and reviewed. If that is going to change, if it's going to be reduced in size, if there's going to be changes to the, how it's going to look, we'll provide that information. If it's going to stay the same, then you already have it and there doesn't need to be an update.
Actually, though, I think we didn't have there were sketches.
Yeah.
We didn't have enough drawings for that.
yeah, we're not, that would be.
That was incomplete information.
Yeah.
So we need more information.
We,
If
we just saw like a.
a front elevation and a couple of
Yeah.
floor plans, maybe a side.
No dimension on the
Yeah.
plan.
It-
We didn't even know how big it was.
There were lots of concerns about, making sure that it wasn't able to have, there was a huge catering
alcohol
kitchen.
and
You
what
know,
it was being
there were
used
lots,
for.
lots of concerns with it.
Well, we can
can
get into
condition
those
it.
concerns in our deliberations and condition things
Condition it.
if we want to. If the applicant, again, doesn't want to be part of that conversation because they want us to close the hearing, so be it. But we can still address those things.
Okay.
Correct.
But you'll provide a more detailed schematic of that building that,
Yes. We'll provide a more complete submittal as to what that building will look like.
But I don't want to just, when you say more, we'll provide more complete, like, if we're going to act as the HTC, like, the slip that says all the information you would provide to the HTC is what I'd like to see. And we talked about that back in, I think, January. So if the building isn't changing, I don't know why we haven't seen it before now. But, moving on.
Yeah, moving on. Okay, so we talked about the rec building. I don't really think we need to get into the pool design, but probably a specific, there should be a specific plan. It should be part of the,
We might wanna-
of the landscape plan.
Yeah.
The pool is X by X.
And what about
We don't know how big the pool is. Is it Olympic?
and fencing?
Fencing, I mean, you have to fence.
But what about hardscaping? That's HTC, right? Like,
Yeah, but what does the fence
Arguably.
look like?
I personally can.
That's an HTC
After a
issue.
year of this, can give up talking about the fence.
yeah, but
And what it looks like.
I hear you, Ed, but like, I'm feeling like that was the goal, to get us to be like, okay, well, now we have 2 hours to do this.
Yeah, so we're
what
gonna
can-
give-
I know, we're
what are
backsliding,
the
we're
giveaways?
backsliding.
Yeah.
So,
So I
again,
wanna
it's.
see, I
I
want
wanna
to see the
see all that
fence, I
stuff.
want to see the hardscaping, whatever they would be
Susan, I
required to
agree
do
with you.
the
I want to
HTC.
potentially, hypothetically speaking, if we don't render a positive decision for them, I want to see what they're going to go with. I want to see the carbon copy of what you guys are going to present to HAC, saying that we denied you on this. I want to see that before the closing of this meeting. Not this one, I'm talking about
Right,
whatever the
whenever.
11th or 12th.
Well, and that information, to the best of my knowledge, is already in the record. It has already been
It's not on
presented and
the
discussed.
92-unit plan.
Have you read through the 1,100 pages that we got? Have you had an opportunity to, or are you listening to what your client or the previous counsel?
Again, whether I read through the 1,100 pages or not in the 2 days since I've been retained, It doesn't change the fact that my clients are telling me that this is information that has been presented throughout the course of the hearing and is being collated into a single place.
Not for the plan that we're looking at now, the
Well,
92-unit
the
plan.
92-unit plan, what we're talking about is trying to get you information with regard to that plan, because you had indicated that that is what you preferred to make a decision on.
It is.
It is, most
So-
definitely, but.
So the whole purpose of us being here tonight and stating that we're willing to submit all this additional information,
It's not additional. It's.
well, it is. If you haven't received it yet, it is additional
But it's what's
information.
required. It's just
it is-
the basic stuff that's required.
Well, first of all, what is required under Chapter 40B is a lot different than what is required under your general local permitting requirements.
Well, but these guys chose for us to serve as the HDC, and so the HDC has certain requirements.
Chapter 40B chose for you to serve as the HDC. When you issue a comprehensive permit, it subsumes all other local permits.
I understand, but we asked these guys if they would, prefer to go to the HDC, and they said, no, we want you guys to do this, so.
And yet, they're still subjected to the submittal requirements under 760 CMR
Okay.
56.052, which we believe, have already been met.
Well,
Leaving that aside, we're trying to get you
Yeah,
a reasonable quantum of information that you can use to support whatever decision you make on a 92-unit plan.
Okay, let's move off the recreation building. We're going to either get new plans, or we're going to condition it by, or we're going to say no rec building. We have options. It will be during the deliberation process.
And, Mr. Chairman, we are completely aware that that is a risk that we have to take, that if you
Understand.
decide you have not been presented sufficient information, that may be a basis of a negative decision.
It may be, or it may not be. It may just simply be a reason for a condition. So we're not there yet. So I think it behooves the applicant to supply the information we're asking for. We're not asking for anything unreasonable. If you don't, you don't. Governance documents, we've seen nothing having to do with an HOA. The narrative description explaining the relationship between the HAA and the condominium trust. I mean, you have two very different, I'm sure you're aware of this, by the way, types of ownership in this development. How does that all work? I would think you would have thought about this by now in a year, but we've never seen anything like that. This also speaks to the fees and whether or not the affordable buyers will be responsible for how that whole thing works.
Their sewer, what is it, their sewer fee?
Well, there's sewer
That's the way
fee, yeah.
it's- Haven't they asked to waive those, right?
Well, more to the point, an explanation should explain how costs for the common area expenses, including the rec building, which we just talked about, will be allocated. Some sort of preliminary HOA, condo docs. Again, I mean, we're not going to get into them in any great detail, and I'm not sure is that our gig? Condo docs?
For later, I think we
So,
Later.
so Mr.
For
Chairman,
later.
You don't get full, as I said at the last meeting.
Right.
I think you're responsible for understanding in general how costs will be shared between the HOA and the condominium trust. And you're interested in what a preliminary budget might look like, because that, and that might come at a later date too, because that information is critical for defining or calculating what the allowable price is for the affordable units. Now, who will have ultimate say on that? The subsidized agency. But all boards I've worked with in the past feel responsible to ask those questions.
All right.
And to make a determination as to whether or not they appear reasonable.
Okay, Ed, I don't mean to interrupt, but I should remember to ask you to go to the mic, only because people are watching and they complain that they can't hear if you don't speak into a mic. So, having said that, I think some preliminary information on that level would be helpful.
So, Mr. Chairman, to clarify, we're happy to provide sort of the information that Ed had discussed. Under Chapter 40B, again, this is preliminary information that's being submitted in every project I've ever worked on. You don't get condominium documents or homeowners association
I don't want
documents.
condo docs.
Yeah, now, but you do get to review them afterwards. You can include a condition that requires a submittal, because sometimes you're going to have conditions within your decision that say, we want to see certain information within condominium documents. So you absolutely can require them to be submitted at a later date for your review and administrative approval. But in
That's
terms
fine.
of the threshold preliminary information, we can get you a short narrative on that.
One of the list here is explanation of whether or not affordable buyers will be responsible for the payment of the sewer connection and sewer privilege fees, or whether applicant will pay these fees. I thought there was some waiver request about that,
There
which
is.
we can get to. All right, critical, according to the applicant, a critical part of this whole plan, and what's driving a lot of the plan, is the year-round resident issue or component. We've seen a sketch outline of that. Is now the time for a year-round, for the more detailed residence plan, George or Ed? And again, you should talk in the mic, please.
I think we were primarily interested in receiving a legal opinion that addressed whether or not there may be some fair housing issues involved with the preference for year-round residents. That has been submitted. I'm not sure there's that much more you can ask for. You have a copy of that. I think it's really, and I'm not sure how much more information can be provided. I think there's going to be a discussion during the deliberation session on that program. I can't think of any additional information that I would ask for on that. And again, it's a question of how much value you put on that program, but that's really not, I think, going to be a major factor in your decision.
Okay. George?
Yeah, just in follow-up to that, I don't envision you really imposing conditions or considering waiver requests in any way related to that year-round housing issue. So I'm not seeing that you need any more information on it than what was provided.
I'm not sure I understand that. It's a big component of the applicant's need for higher density to have that component. I would think that that would be something that,
We talked about this in a couple of meetings ago, and Jim Mondani had, made a very astute comment, at least from my perspective, legally, about, and he didn't mean it in an insulting way, but he said it was a red herring issue.
right.
And I see it as a red herring issue as well, because the philosophy behind the developer's project is not relevant to you in terms of the jurisdiction that you have over this project. The only reason that it's coming to you as a 40B project is because they have a component of the project that has SHI-eligible units. And those are completely different than the year-round housing units. So that's where I see the relevance to you is, yeah, you can ask questions or confirm that they have the requisite amount of SHI housing involved in this, but, issues concerning the year-round housing program are really not relevant to you. And in terms of, density or the number of units that they need, you're not conditioning this in terms of quote-unquote density, just for the purpose of talking about density. You're talking about site plan review issues. So if you have considerations that are, valid considerations under the regulations with regard to how this site is going to be developed and how much impervious surface or how much construction you're going to allow where. If that results in a reduction in density, so be it. But you're not reducing it for the sake of reducing it per se. And then on the other hand, the fact that the developer may envision a certain housing program or goal that they seek to achieve by this project is also not relevant in terms of arguing for a certain unit amount. If you cut amount of units and they claim that that renders the project uneconomic, then that's an issue for consideration either in your hearing or once that hearing is closed, and that's going to be litigated at the HAC. But that's the only issue that will come up of relevance in terms of reducing unit numbers. Does the reduction render the project uneconomic, or does the imposition of a requirement or condition on the project render it uneconomic? Does the denial of a waiver render it uneconomic? And that's where that distinction came in. I don't mean to speak for you, Jim, but that's where I thought that Jim meant by the red herring issue, and I agree with it legally.
Yeah, Jeff, in my view, it just muddies the water.
Sure.
And we don't really need to get involved in it, and it's more of a marketing thing to me. And we don't even want to get into the enforceability issues with it and definition. You know, I could see this coming back on us later.
Yeah.
Because someone sues because they lived there for 5 months and 29 days, and, you know, those issues. So, that's my.
I get it.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that, just where you were going, George? So if we're looking at site plan review, and in our site plan review, you're saying, you know, we say the impervious surface is way too much, we need to reduce that, we need to bring more green space, and in that process, the number of units goes down, and the applicant then says, well, that makes this uneconomic, but we don't have any control over this year-round restriction that they are self-imposing. And does housing, or mass housing or HAC have any, they don't really get involved with the self-imposed restriction. So they could then make the year-round restriction units a smaller number and raise the price on those condos, or eliminate it altogether. And then the project would become economic again. Because if HAC's gonna say, for them to argue that it's uneconomic, it would have, it would, they would just, I would imagine, would say, well, you've undercut yourself on this self-imposed restriction, so how does that go into play in those deliberations, or am I just?
Right, well, and I don't mean this facetiously, I wasn't headed anywhere. I was actually done with what I was talking about that topic.
Well, just, sorry, you got me
in
thinking
that,
about
right,
that.
But in that follow-up question, you don't know where that will end up. It will depend on what the argument is. If they're arguing it renders it uneconomic, they produce their pro forma, and they produce it as revised with whatever condition is being imposed, and they prove that it renders it uneconomic. Not just the reduction in numbers, but any other condition or requirement that you may impose on the project. So the
But
the
we're
way
not
to
imposing that.
well, the way to approach it is in terms of the way to approach it is a two-pronged way. Is that number one, your conditions or requirements need to be reasonable. That's first threshold question. Are you imposing it? Are you treating them differently than other applicants? You can't treat them unequal to other permitting applicants.
Of course.
And then are you imposing conditions that are reasonable and lawful under the regulations? So if you get by that, and they're saying that one of those conditions, while reasonable, renders my project uneconomic, then they need to go through that process. If that preferably, my preference would have been, if that argument got made during this public hearing process, that they would produce the pro forma, and then you would have a peer review of that pro forma, and we would have that discussion in the public hearing process.
Well, none of this, you know, we may get there, you know.
But if the hearing closes and it ends up that as a result of your conditioning the project, then they're making the uneconomic claim, that may get litigated at HAC. And if it does, they'll have to produce it, that's a de novo review at HAC, so it's based on new evidence, or whatever evidence they come up with. So if at that time they're making that claim to HAC, they produce that pro forma, we have the opportunity in a litigation context now of having, and so it's no longer a peer review, it would basically be an expert witness that would be retained by the board, and that expert witness would review their pro forma, and we would submit testimony on that to the HAC. So I hope that's helpful to you, but you could go into a million hypotheticals about, you know, what is and isn't sensible for the project, but it is only in the context of what conditions or requirements render it uneconomic to get them to the HAC.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, all I'm going to say about all of that is, yeah, let's not just think just the gloom and doom side. Maybe the 92-unit plan, you know, it all works out.
Yeah,
And we're
no, I
not
hope
going to
so.
hack. And everybody isn't suing everybody. So, anyway, so can we move on from that point? What was the last point? The year-round thing.
We're done with that, didn't we just?
Yeah, no, I was just reminding myself where I just was. Okay. An updated list of requested exceptions / waivers.
We've committed to submitting that.
Yeah, you said that. Okay, based on the 92 units. I'm
a
looking at
phasing
my
plan?
phone only because
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not texting my
Phasing
wife. I
plan?
just want to look in my email.
Phasing plan for the
Yeah.
construction?
Phasing plan, we did talk about a phasing plan.
On the old unit, on the 100 unit.
And
Staging or staging?
Phasing.
phasing. And the applicant at the time, but again, it was a different plan, stated they were going to build all of the condominiums at once. So things have changed. So I'm just wondering if,
We can submit a phasing plan.
thank you.
And with regard to plans, I'm not sure if we covered it or not, but we'll also update the site plans to include, you know, the setback information and basically bring them to the level of what the
Right.
100-unit
Right.
plan was. I don't know
That's
if we
what we're-
specifically discussed
Fire
that, but
hydrants?
we will do that.
Oh, yeah, the fire hydrant plan is.
Fire hydrants and,
We'd also like input from the fire marshal, because regardless of whether or not it's 100 or 92, it makes a change. There's buildings getting shifted around,
Right.
things getting squeezed around,
Right.
streets getting smaller, bigger, whatever.
Well, we're not going to have time for that,
Don, I'm
probably.
assuming these plans will be able to be engineered enough
So
to
we
know that
just wanna make a
radiuses
note
will
that we
work.
Yeah, fair enough.
You were saying that there were some driveways that, you know, or that there might be areas where you might have to change the shape of the island to make
Yes, yeah,
radiuses work.
it's in the 100-unit plan, the detail shows with the fire truck, the access for.
No,
our
but for the
turning
92-unit
radius.
plan.
Yes, but we'll do
You-
the same thing for the 92-unit.
Yeah, and we'll
plan when we design it.
we'll have an engineered plan for that.
Yes, showing the fire truck.
When I said, by the way, I was looking at my phone, my email, I wasn't checking in my email. I was looking at a list that I had in my emails. Just want to be clear about that.
And Mr. Chairman, with regard to fire hydrant location, I think you had just mentioned that. That's generally something that, you know, is subject to approval of the fire department post-permit.
Yeah,
Because ultimately,
Okay.
no matter what you say or do within your decision, the fire chief has to actually review the plans and sign off of them under the fire code. So if we show you locations of fire hydrants on our preliminary plans and the fire department says, we don't like where they are, we want more, we have to, you know, make them happy, so.
I
That's
think
certainly
what
an easily-
Lisa, what we've been accustomed to in the past is more detailed plans so that if, this isn't a great example, the fire hydrant is in a place, ultimately the fire chief says, I want a fire hydrant here, and that changes the plan, then you have to come back for modification. So we sort of like to have all that information ahead of time, so we
And I
don't have
underst-
to see you again on a modification.
And I understand that, and that's, you know, the risk that we'll have to take moving
Fair
forward.
enough.
What about information on dumpster locations, mail collection is, I think, in the secondary building, but trash, how all that stuff's gonna be handled?
Yeah, the 100-unit plan did have some dumpster locations, so we would want that same level of detail.
And we just committed to giving you that
Right.
level of detail on the engineering site plans.
So, what else? Sewer, yeah, well,
Yeah,
the sewer,
sewer.
clearly, you're going to have to, as George alluded, George spoke about this, by the way, about the sewer. You're going to have a sewer plan that's viable, I assume, or are we expected to kick that down the road? No. I didn't think so.
No, I had said that at the beginning,
I
maybe
thought
not
so.
clearly enough.
No, it was
No,
clear
that's-
to me,
You're the
but-
sewer commissioners for this
Right.
process.
So we need a plan that shows a viable option, and
That was one thing that I had said, because of the time frame that's being imposed, hopefully there's going to be a lot of productive dialogue going on between the town's sewer consulting engineers, the sewer director, and Mr. Bracken and whoever else is on his team about, coming up with, an agreed plan and some conditions that can then be presented back to you. Otherwise, you're going to be presented with a situation where you either impose your own requirements or deny the requested connection in terms of what ends up getting submitted to you by that date. But, this is not, Weston and Sampson did provide recommendations in January. That dialogue is ongoing between the sewer commissioner and the development team. It started earlier this week, and hopefully, we can make some progress on that, so that we can address that by the time of that final public hearing.
okay, I have a specific question on the sewer, but I don't want to open up the whole can of worms just a little bit. This is more to Don. At one point there, and in this packet, there is a memo from the consultant stating 4 options, and I think it was number 3 was the force main down to the plant. That was part of your original proposal, and there were 2 options that you were going to explore. Whatever happened to that?
If you recall, you got a letter from the Board of Selectmen saying that option was no longer viable, even though that's the option that we discussed and Weston and Sampson thought was viable. And then after that point is when we requested additional information for the other force mains.
Why did the selectmen say it wasn't viable? Was there a reason?
No, we don't know. And that,
That's really a question more for me to address than the development team is. And I wasn't involved in, I wasn't involved as counsel in helping to craft the select board's comments to you. So I don't know what the basis of that was. All I can tell you is that Weston and Sampson has identified that as, number 1, the option to be pursuing on this for problems with regard to the other alternatives. And it's also consistent with the town's long-term established planning efforts in that area, and it's consistent with a detailed sewer study that Weston and Sampson conducted. That information was conveyed to the development team in January, even though, there were certain requests for information that they had submitted that hadn't been responded to yet or provided. So that is what the recommendation is. So whatever the basis of that was, in the select board's letter to you, I'm telling you where, the town has a engineering consulting firm working on it and had been working on sewer issues predating this project. And that option is the option that they're recommending that they go forward with. And that's consistent with what the sewer director wants to do as well.
This is the force main down the
Correct.
road. Okay.
Correct.
I just want to
Doug- Hold on. At one point, gravity was talked about.
The line to the plant is what I mean. Yes.
Dedicated force main with a pump station on the site.
All right, let's not everybody talk. One at a time. Who wants to talk? Go ahead, Cormac.
I just would suggest you pull out the January 5th letter, 25th letter right now, so that it is clearly discussed. I understand where Mr. Pucci's going, but it clearly says gravity line from the site to the treatment plant with a pump station at the treatment plant. Just want to make sure that everybody knows that
Thanks for-
that's the recommendation of the town right now.
We can pull out, there's
Wait,
no
wait.
problem pulling out the January 25 letter. I think
Just want to clarify that.
So, Mr. Chairman, I mean, what it sounds like is that this isn't really an issue of submittal of information, so much as it is there are multiple different options that have been discussed, and the board needs to know which one the applicant wants to be their proposal. That doesn't mean that whatever decision you issue is going to choose what we say we want to do, but you need to know at least which one of these different, options is the one that we want to be our official proposal. We certainly will commit to working with the sewer department and their consultants between now and the next hearing, but whatever information we submit will certainly include the information as to how we want to proceed with the sewer.
Mr. Chairman, can I speak?
Thank you. Yep.
Hi, Linda Durensis, 5 Gladland. For one of the things for this 1,100-page dump that we got last night, I feel is a marketing tool for the developers going up to hack, because it doesn't give anybody, it doesn't say anything, it doesn't have any difference of opinions, and in it, they waive their attorney-client privilege and show how it is clear that the town is not working in good faith. I would like it on the record that the town has never stonewalled, never not worked in good faith. It is like we have two different things. Also, Mr. Bracken says he and Chesia agree on a lot of things. If you read the Chesia report from the last packet, there's 41 times they disagree. And in it, it is said, because you guys are unpaid volunteers who have given a tremendous amount of time, I recommend that the landscape architect discuss this with the board, that you bring in experts, and you don't have the time to do all this. Also, in regards to the conditions, I'm familiar with Mr. Posner and his conditions. 18 years later, he is...
Let's not go to Sherburne, okay?
But you know what?
Let's just
You're-
talk about this application.
Okay, the conditions, I wouldn't put so much value in the conditions because you may not be able to uphold them.
Thank you.
Can I just make one comment, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, me too.
The reference to the 1,100 page document dump that you guys got the other day, that was at the request of the board, because you'll recall at the last meeting, there was where are all the documents for the 100 unit plan. So what we did, and it was hard to determine exactly which ones to include and not include, is we submitted each document that was listed in the same exact chronology that they were listed in Peter Freeman's memo of 3/7. And so we thought that it may be helpful just as far as navigating those documents for you, and that's why we did. There's nothing new in that document at all. Thanks.
All right, well, it wasn't very helpful, but you tried, so
Can I
thank
just
you.
get
We
back,
appreciate that.
I just wanted to get back to the sewer issue and what, my recommendations to you are. Remember, you're the permitting board, I'm counsel to you. You could follow my recommendations or not, but these are my recommendations, is that a dialogue take place between the development team and the sewer director and Weston and Sampson consulting engineers, so that we can come up with a viable set of conditions that you would impose on that comprehensive permit. I don't want to, and so the reason I'm reiterating that, and I'm communicating this to the development team, is I do not envision a process by which they would just simply come back to you and say, this is our preferred option, and that's the end of it. I'm hoping for a detailed, data-driven discussion and some solutions to come back to you with. And I just want to be clear, the January 25 letter from Weston and Sampson is very detailed about background information and the viability of certain options. But just to clarify, the recommendation is looking at the future needs areas and the sewer system extensions recommended in the 2014, it's called CWMP, which is the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan that was undertaken by the town in 2014, which obviously predated this project. The installation of a gravity sewer along South Shore Road with a new pump station installed at the Surfside wastewater treatment facility would be the preferred option for the town. Now, so that's what the option being recommended to you, sitting as the sewer commissioners for this project, is being made. Whether or not, we can reach agreement with the developer in the meantime concerning that option and a reasonable set of conditions about how that would occur, is something which remains to be seen. But that is what the option that's being recommended to you, sitting in the shoes of the local sewer board.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, my response to that is we absolutely will commit to working with the sewer department and their consultants. I can't guarantee that we're going to come to an agreement. I don't have enough, familiarity with what was going on with that to really even have an opinion on the matter. But we will try to get there, and if we don't, we'll let you know why we didn't.
Fair enough.
Can I make an objection to this?
To what?
Sure, I'll get out of the way.
One of the things I saw in the packet was all these, what I would call backroom communications. And what's being proposed is that a critical issue affecting this town is going to be decided upon by a few people working through emails and working in the back room. There needs to be much more transparency. There needs to be much more involvement by you, sorry to say, but you are the sewer commissioners. And I don't think an issue of this importance should be done where the public can't see the options, the discussions, all of those details are unknown to the public and perhaps to you. When I read the packet and saw some of the stuff that's gone on that was non-public, I think that's a mistake.
Thank you.
I just wanted to respond without getting argumentative. Yeah, it's not the preferred approach. It would be preferable to have everything take place, every single dialogue in the public hearings. As a practical matter, that can't really practically happen in a 40B process. So, like, for instance, peer review consultants will communicate with one another. That happened with the traffic. It's happened so far with some communications about the sewer issues. Many other issues have gone on. That's not backroom communications. Those are communications trying to get to a decent substantive recommendation. And then all of those communications then get reported back to you in the public hearing process so that you can deliberate on that and the public can comment on that. And any communications between the sewer department and the development team so far have been requested by public records requests. Those have all been produced. And
don't do that, Paul. Please.
They've been produced, and they're part, I believe, they're part of the Eleanor's public hearing packet. And if they're not, she can certainly include them because there's been some back and forth of emails of, David Gray answering certain information requests, Mr. Bracken getting back to him, then David Gray responding. That's all. I've been copying Eleanor. She has all of that. If it's not posted, she's happy to post it so the public can comment on it.
It's in the packet.
There's no backroom communication. There's just an effort at trying to reach a good substantive result for the town in this.
Okay, thank you. Again, the applicant, you want to speak? Go ahead.
So Mr. Chairman, and at the pleasure of the board, my client is willing to have his engineer participate in a workshop meeting if you want to have a member of the board present at that workshop meeting sometime before April 11th, in which you would have the sewer department and their consultant present as well. And then you could report back to the board. We're happy to have that conversation play out in that manner, so that you are part of that discussion.
That may or may not work. Your sewer consultants are not located on island, and so we'll see.
All right, potentially maybe a Skype meeting or something. Jeffrey, you volunteer for that if it works?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on. You want to speak?
Yeah.
About what?
On the sewer issue.
Okay.
So I must be getting tired, but I think I partially agree with Attorney Pucci. The boards should accept what the town recommends and not what the developer wants to do. Developer doesn't necessarily have the best interest in the town. He has the best interest in making as much money as possible. So if the town recommends a force main or a gravity main, whatever, that's what this board should go with, even if the applicant objects to it. That's my first point. Second point, there was some comment, this is where I disagree with Mr. Pucci, about the public records request, and not all the documents that were received were included, because the emails that we read in the packet dump between Mr. Gray and Bracken, et cetera, were not included in that. So there is some backdoor dealing that is not available to the public when requested.
They're in this packet.
They're in this packet, but they were not part of the public records request that a citizen of Nantucket asked for.
I thought that the documents that were requested in the public records request were produced up until that time. I haven't, quite frankly, read the document dump. I don't know what's included in there. Maybe the communications came after the public records request or the deadline.
They were
or the
not.
production.
They're-
All right, let's not get into back and forth, okay? Let's
You know,
just,
Look, no, Mr. Chair, let me be clear about something,
Go ahead.
okay? I'm not going to put up with that. This stuff about yelling out from the audience, that's not true, and we haven't produced documents, that's just not true. And I'm not being at all critical to I don't know what the basis was saying, you know, you're tired, so you're agreeing partially with me. I don't know what the basis of that, it's a sort of a personal, inappropriate comment. There has been a lot of usefulness from the public records requests. I'm not denying that at all. One of the, one critical point of something that was requested gave us the deadline to respond to the NHESP determination. So I'm not disparaging at all the ability to make public records requests or the town's burden and obligation to properly respond to that. All I'm trying to say is that to try to create some type of inference that there's backroom communications, between town board or, town personnel and the development team just simply isn't true. As a practical matter, to try to get a good result, there has to be ongoing communications going back and forth, and that's what's going on. And the town is happy to produce everything that's been communicated between any sewer consultant and the developer. Hopefully that's come out of the latest packet request, but we're happy to look at it and produce anything further.
thank you. Okay. You finished with that issue for now? Yeah? Okay. So the applicant has agreed to work diligently to get a new sewer proposal in front of us. Okay. I mean, that in large measure was my list of info we need on the new the 92 unit plan.
It was even larger than my list, but we've agreed to it.
I just asked a procedural
Go ahead.
question from George. I suspect that we might not have all the information by everything by the 11th to approve things the way we would want. And on a number of occasions, we've talked about after, dealing with it after the comprehensive permit is approved. How does that work? And, for instance, a landscape plan. How much leeway do we have to say, well, no, this isn't what we envisioned?
No, you really don't have, I set out sort of your after-the-fact approval parameters. There are things like state approvals that may be required on the project down the line.
Yeah.
It can be subject to an as-built or a further detailed landscape plan as the plans further develop. But you are approving an incorporated site plan in your decision, and that this is what I was getting at too before about a critical component of this project are the site design issues that are involved.
Right.
So you want to, it would behoove the applicant to provide you with as much landscape plan details as they can get to you, so that you can address that in the public hearing process, and also so that you can review and comment on it back to them if the public wants to comment on it, to be able to have that dialogue in the public hearing. Because once you close that public hearing, The only discussion that you can have on it is in your open deliberations, but only amongst yourselves. You can't ask questions from anybody else. So you don't. So the basic long and the short of your question is, you want to be looking at, a real landscaping plan that provides you with sufficient detail so that you can be confident in what you're approving.
Yeah, I just use it as an example, but I envision things that are going to be possibly outstanding that we say prior to a building permit being pulled for the first house, all these things get finalized.
Yes, but they can't be just to give an example of what you can't do would be other approvals. Like you can't say, well, this issue is subject to approval from the planning board. Anything that would be subsumed within your comprehensive permit process, you have to have a decision on. So either you're going to condition it at that time or you're going to deny as to that particular issue if you don't have sufficient information on that.
So for instance, the condo docs, right, we're not going to finalize those.
No.
But what if they're, what leeway would we have after the fact to
Well, there would be enforcement
disagree
issues.
with something
Right.
in there, like a year-round housing component or something?
Yeah, when it gets into their housing program, then you're getting into really issues that are more in line for the subsidizing agency, and then they're going to do their final approval of that. Then you would have possible, issues in terms of enforcement with regard to that, but you don't have a whole lot of input into, the issues concerning the housing that are going to go to the subsidizing agency. So,
As much as possible, Jim, we're going to try to write as much of this into the comprehensive permit as possible. Again, I think the process works better when there's a give and take, but if we get closed out by time, we get closed out. And the applicant has promised us a landscape plan, to use that example, and hopefully we're going to have it by then. Did you want to speak about?
I'd like to speak to procedure, if I might, for a minute.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Peter Fenn, Nantucket Land Council. I've tried not to jump up and down and get in the way because I know you had a lot to get through. There's a lot of stuff here that we would like to comment on or that we disagree with or that we agree with it on. But I think you're doing most of that. We appreciate the time and effort this board has made. What I want to say, and by the way, I don't think you get the chance to review and approve things after. You grant the permit, that's done. You can require things be submitted to you, but you don't get to revisit them. Once the permit's issued, it's issued, and if you need something to either issue a permit, deny a permit, or condition a permit, you need to see it by the 11th. I don't think there's any question. I want to be clear about that. I think this process is extremely unfair to this board, and by extension to the public and to my client. This is a public hearing. The public hearing is not to get the plan, the project, 24 hours or 18 hours before your final hearing on the project that you've seen for the first time on the 10th, and then approve it. There's no chance for our consultants to review it. There's no chance for us to review it. There's no chance for the public to review it. There's no chance for you to review it. There's no chance for your peer review people to review it. It's completely unfair. It's not what a public hearing is envisioned. Public hearing envisions review of a project and a plan that's submitted in complete form that you and the public get to see. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I think you're being set up. I think you're being set up by giving an incomplete project that you either have to approve as almost a pig in a poke without seeing things like a landscape plan and a sewer plan and all the stuff you can see, or to get you deny it so this applicant can go into the HAC de novo and get whatever they want. I think it's unfair. I don't think there's much we can do about it. I think we're kind of spinning our wheels and wasting our time because we're not really talking about what the real issue is what the applicant wants is an approval of a half-formed project or denial. They can go somewhere else where they'll get a more favorable reception. Let's just recognize that. Ask for what you want. Understand if you deny it, there are consequences, which I think you understand, or try to approve it with the best conditions you can put on it. And say, we want to see a gravity sewer. Say we want to see 25% open space because we know they're endangered species and we know that we need buffer zones and we know that we got recharge issues and we know it's an area that is connective between other open space areas. Put those conditions on. Be reasonable, but do what you need to do given the information you have. They're not going to give you what you should really have. That's pretty clear. It's a flim-flam. Let's recognize it, do the best we can. If you need to deny it, deny it. If you can condition it, if you can. If you can't because the project is half-baked and incomplete.
That's what
well,
we're trying
you
to get
got.
to, Peter.
I know that, but I
But-
think we should
but-
recognize what's going on here, and we object
Thank you.
to not getting a project that our people can review and give you our opinion on it when it's coming in a day
Well,
before
your
hearing.
objection is noted, but unfortunately, we're the board that does that.
No, I know that, and I want to tell you that we support you in that. We
Oh, we
understand the
appreciate it.
condition you're in and the position you're in, and it is what it is, and I think we should recognize it, and that's it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just to very briefly respond to that, if it was the intention of my clients to pull a flim-flam and basically try to bait you into denying this project so we can take an appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee, they could very simply state that we're not giving you any more information. Please give us a decision on the 100-unit plan. We're done talking about anything else. That's not what we're doing here tonight. We're trying to provide you the requisite information that you believe necessary for you to make your decision with regard to a concept plan that you prefer to my client's preferred development plan. And that's all that is happening here tonight.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to speak?
Yes, my name's Diane Holgate, and I'm speaking for my mother, Diane Coombs, who is ill and couldn't be here tonight. But she wanted me to, I have a little statement that she sent me. She said that if we don't deny this and fight, this land will be lost forever. Our children and others will wonder why we didn't fight for our land. The lawyer may say it's not defendable following the 40B rules, but that is not true. Each case is different. The state is making Nantucket, that is 14 miles long by 5 miles wide, follow the same requirements as Tingsbury, Sudbury, Concord, etc. We're not those places. We're Nantucket. We're special. We're different. This can be fought. The lawyer, it can be fought. It'll cost less to fight it, I think, or about the same as the cost to increase the infrastructure needed to support this overbuilt development. This development isn't Nantucket. The buildings are too massive. HDC would never approve these buildings. Not that you actually know what they're going to look like. You're not being given the degree of detail that you would get at HDC. And it's too much, it's too big, it's not Nantucket, it's killing us. It's developments like this, once this goes through, there'll be more. And it will kill Nantucket. I think you need to deny it. My mother thinks you need to deny it. It's too big, too much, and it's going to destroy us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to speak to that?
Should I respond to that?
No, you don't have to.
My mother thinks that you should approve it, I guess.
All right, anyway, okay, so obviously denial's on the table, approval with conditions on the table, approval as submitted is on the table. We're not there yet. Hopefully, we're getting new information by the 11th, and we'll go there. So we can talk about waivers, I guess, but it seems a little premature to me.
Although I don't know how we're gonna get through this whole thing in 2 hours next on the.
Well, we're not, but
We're not, so we're gonna have to, it's not fair to the public.
I think we all agree it's not fair.
Right, so I think we should try to get through some of the waivers, even if it doesn't make sense, just so that they can have a chance to speak.
Okay.
Yeah, because they'll be generally, hopefully the same,
Yeah.
Just one other question. Are we going to have some planning board guidance on this? I brought it up before. I know we got guidance a while ago, but a lot of time, and maybe I'm the only one in the dark on the process, but we hear, well, you're asking for more than a planning board would, and I just want to make sure that
Again,
kind of frame for us what we need to be focused on.
Yeah, our consultant and attorney are there as resources to answer those questions. I will say in the past, we've gotten certainly, I've sat on 2, we've gotten more information.
Yeah, I was going to comment on that. I would expect much more input. I've been wondering about that component of it. I did see a letter from way back when with a, a preliminary set of comments, but, typically, you'd be getting more planning board comment on it for you, for you to act on their comments relevant to it. I mean, I've had some municipalities that the planning board attempts to act as the ZBA. They try to, take over the project. I'm not suggesting that that should occur here. It's not appropriate for them to do it, but typically you do get a lot more, planning board input into your process, especially when you're at the point now that you're talking about an actual going forward on a approval with conditions or denial of a particular plan when you're getting toward the final aspect of it. It would be helpful. I think that, and again, this goes, it's not my preferred procedure to deal with it this way. Let's be clear about it. It's, you'd prefer to have further public hearing time on the 92-unit plan. It's the developer's prerogative to shut down they've already granted an extension to the 4th, so they can't take that back, so you have the ability to go there. But they have the ability now at this point to insist that you close the hearing by the 4th. They're saying that they, are trying to be responsive to your desire to, issue a decision based on the 92-unit plan. So, as much as you can get done under that time frame, you can decide whether or not to do that. And it's your prerogative to proceed this way. It's obvious you're not happy with the process, but you have a couple of options. You can either go forward on a decision on the 100-unit plan that they've issued, not closing the public hearing tonight, but going forward with a further discussion on that, and having another public hearing session, hopefully, by the time that the deadline is, and issue a decision on that 100-unit plan. Or you can take them up on their offer that they're going to provide you further detailed information on the preferred 92-unit plan, and you have to act on that plan under the time frame that they're, imposing on you. Those are your two options at this point. You don't. It's not the preferred way to deal with this, because there's a possibility you may get information on this project on the 11th, and not even the 10th. And you can choose to proceed in this manner or not. But your other option would be to go forward on the 100-unit plan, because that is a more detailed plan, and issue close the public hearing by the 4th on that plan. So at this point, you have those options. And if you choose that option about going forward with that offer to close it on the 11th, then I just recommend that you get as much accomplished as you can, before then. If there's a common set of waivers applicable to both projects, makes sense to start talking about it. Makes sense for Eleanor to get in touch with Mr. Chessier about, his final review. Eleanor could remind the local boards and officials that we're getting toward the end of the process. Submit any comments, that you may have on the 92-unit plan by the 11th, and do that. And deal with it as best you can under the circumstances, and then end up with a decision on the 92-unit plan on the 11th. Or if there's a productive dialogue going forward, I never say never, and I remain optimistic about the ability to work, in a productive manner. And maybe if there's productive discussions going on, the development team may choose that it makes sense to continue the public hearing, beyond the 11th, so that there can be some further input or finalization on issues that have been worked out. But right now, these are your only two options.
Thank you. Okay, so there are options, and we'll deal with them as they come up. So you want to go look through the waivers quickly?
Yeah, just quickly, please.
Yeah, Bruce, I don't want you to talk about every waiver at once. Do you want to talk about,
I can answer
you want to
that
let the
question.
board do it first, and then you comment them as we go?
What I would like to do is, I submitted some comments way back in December on the waivers, and I'd like to give that back, another set to you today, if you don't have it.
I have
Because
them.
I have it. We got emailed.
it's now buried under 2,000 pages of,
No, they came separately.
Is it dated
Okay.
12/3?
all right, Eleanor wasn't sure if she could get
Yeah, I
that to you.
have them.
Okay.
I printed them out too.
I'll take a copy of it. Save me the trouble
Sure.
looking through.
Can I get a copy?
Thank you. First, you gotta-
I think I have it.
I emailed it to you.
Yeah.
What page is the waiver?
Well, she emailed it separately.
I have it in packet,
No, I have
packet
not. I'm talking about this
277.
Oh, 84.
All right, I was looking at
Yeah,
77.
packet,
84 is the new one, I think.
I think they're the same.
packet 2, page,
84.
Hey, Bruce. Hey, Bruce.
Yeah, maybe I'll get to take that one back.
Jeez, we could have gotten the secret in.
hold on, package,
Clue that one
part
down.
2,
It's 84.
77 to 84 to 90 is the newest one.
Yeah, that's right.
So what are we going to do about these waivers? We're just going to give a general sense, which we've done before, I might add.
I have a suggestion.
Not in a while.
Go ahead, Bruce.
All right. So it's unusual for an applicant to request waiver that doesn't specifically prove why the applicant needs the waiver. They haven't explained to the board why it can't meet the regulations, what they've done to minimize the impact of the waiver on the project, and the remaining impacts of the waiver. You have nothing in writing from the applicant that justify these waivers, just eliciting, we need these.
This page is distorted.
And what I just gave you is my comments on the ones from back in December. I don't think the 92-unit project's going to require any less waivers than what you're going to be looking at in this. But they should justify each one, and before you even look at them. Thank you.
Thank you. This is what we have in front of us, a waiver list that is such as it is. So I'm thinking that's what we need to discuss.
You're on page 84?
Yeah.
I'm on page 84.
Okay.
I assume that's the right one. I mean, I don't know. They're not labeled and,
Yeah, they were dated on the thing. That's the one that's,
84 in packet 2.
It's dated, yeah, what is that?
well, that was when it was submitted. That's when it was
That was the first one that did,
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, this could be a typo.
They're both the same?
I don't know if
No,
they're
I
the same. I
think
didn't
this
check
84
them all.
has a couple changes, because they didn't ask, they're now not asking for road width waivers, things like that.
Right.
Anyway, that's
So-
why I think we should go through them.
Yeah.
Well, Marianne, you
Yeah.
taking over here?
I'm going to try and take over. For the applicant, Mary Ann Hanley. And we'll try and go through these waivers. The original application, of course, requests a waiver to be granted from requirements to apply to the town or other municipal boards for departments, permits, et cetera, and that the comprehensive permit be issued in lieu of same. And we also include our right to amend the requested waivers. And if, as a result of this conversation, right, when we do the final waiver list to submit, we'll include those as well. Those are all applicable by statute. We can start. I have not had a chance to see Mr. Perry's list here, so I will address it as I go through the waiver list and prepare the final list, and I'm sure he'll chime in if he has any questions or comments. But if it works for you, we can start with this comparison worksheet. The
Yeah,
most
on
recent
page
one was the
84.
December one.
Right.
And it had been prepared in an attempt, because I think, Lisa, you had asked to see something on a chart or a table form for the waivers. And at the same time, what we did is the original waiver requested, the second column is basically the 156-unit plan. The third column, the potential modification waiver list, relates to the 100-unit plan. So we tried to delineate between those. Would a waiver still be needed in the 100-unit plan for a particular portion? Would another waiver be needed? Do we need to add waivers? And what were the differences in some of the waivers? Because some of them, we still needed the waivers, but the proposals were different. The math on these may change slightly when Dawn sits down and, does the plan, because I don't have the lot dimensions and the final setbacks.
It's hard to believe.
So we'll go through that. But let's start. Zoning waivers on the section 139.7, the use chart. We need a waiver that would allow apartment buildings as applicable to the condominium units, which are not, apartments not prohibited, are not allowed normally in the LUG2 zone. That waiver would be requested for any plan that has the condominium units. Section 12B, the overlay, the original application had talked about needing a waiver to allow 68% of impervious area. On the 100-unit plan, that waiver would not be needed, and I have to, again, leave that open. I'm assuming with a lesser amount of density, the waiver wouldn't be needed, but until Don looks at it, we can't finalize that.
So I have a question. I think this is the only waiver related to drainage. Is that right? Don, and you're saying you're not asking for a waiver.
Yes, well, on the 100-unit plan, we showed all impervious surfaces were going to be recharged. So under this bylaw, as long as you recharge the 95% of the impervious surfaces, then you're not restricted to the 15% of 2,500 square feet.
And this is the only zoning bylaw related to drainage? So everything else is state?
Well, there are
Regulations.
subdivision regulations that have drainage requirements.
Okay.
But we're using the state regulations, which are actually more stringent, so.
So is that true in every case, that the state regs are more stringent than the local regs?
No, not necessarily. No, I think, I mean, I would have to go back and look at this, when we get to subdivision regulations, I don't think we ask for any waivers on that because we're doing something in addition. But most towns, whether it's in their regulations or not, we go by the stormwater management regulations, which is what this design is designed for, the state regulations.
So I think my point on this waiver is, we have a lot of discussion about drainage. I think it's mostly state regulations, and this is the one waiver related to drainage, and they're not asking for a waiver.
We may not need it.
Well, or it's possible.
I anticipate we won't need any of those waivers. And the state regulations kick in because we're in a zone too. So even if we were doing a regular subdivision, we would still have to comply with the state regulations no matter what, because we're in a zone too.
Some of this, or this is a question from whomever, the Chesia report goes into these waivers as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, yes, he goes into the waivers, and I don't know if you saw it in the packet, but we did a response to every one of his comments, and it included responses to the waiver sections as well.
Right, so if John thought that there was a local reg that, or rule, or bylaw that was more stringent, he would have, he notes it.
Okay.
So you have to dive into that a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, he may have, I'm not saying that he did, but he may have identified something that's not on this waiver list, in other words.
No, I just wanted to clarify. I thought there were more local regulations related to drainage, though.
Sometimes the local stuff is more stringent, not necessarily drainage, sometimes it's not.
So he took his initial letter and then he responded in red, but I don't know what the.
All right, so, 139,
Chesia.
12B,
I don't know, we
you're
had
not,
the
you don't
original
think you're asking for waivers?
Possible, yep. So then we can move on to 13916, the intensity regulations. Again, I don't have the final lot dimensions. Some of these may change, but on the 100-unit plan, we were requesting 5,000 square foot minimum lot size. Frontage was essentially 50 feet on almost all lots, except there was 25 feet on one lot, and that was because of where it was positioned in relation to the road, and 40 feet on the condo lot, because there were two access points for that. We had requested to allow front yard setback down to 0 feet if necessary. Again, when we see the final plan, that may happen. On the 100-lot plan, several of the lots, I know someone had mentioned a 10-foot setback, may have complied with that, or a 5-foot. However, on some of the lots, especially lots that abut Sachem's Path and the lots that abut the owners on Wero, the houses were moved forward, closer to the street, to allow for more distance between the abutting neighborhood properties. There were also some sheds on that side, that's where they needed to be placed. They were fairly close to the road, but the house itself was further back. And again, the curvature of the road. It's like sewing. It's a lot easier to sew a straight seam than it is to sew a curved seam. And we may see some of that with the 92 unit because some of the roads they're much more curvy as opposed to straight up and down. On the original application, we had asked for 50% ground cover. We have, on the 100 lot, we had moved that down to 30%. I don't have the final on that, but I'm assuming we may certainly meet that. Side and rear yard setbacks is 5 feet. Basically, what was outlined on the 100-foot reflects zoning that's applicable to 7 other zoning districts in the town where 5,000 square feet is allowed. On those 5,000 square foot zoning districts, ground cover ranges anywhere from 30% to 40%, 30% to 50%, excuse me. So we are hoping to keep it close to the 30% range. Frontage is 40 to 50 feet on most of the lots. We're hoping that we'll be within that range. Front yard setback on the others, in the 7 zoning districts ranges anywhere from 0 front yard setback to 10 feet. ROH is 0. I think R5, R1 is 10. Side and rear yard setbacks can be 5 to 10 feet. And the 10 feet side yard setback is more applicable to those districts where the ground cover is at least 50%. So with 30%, we're hoping 5 feet on either side should work, since the structures won't be as 50% of the ground cover. Any questions?
Well, yeah, I don't know. How does the board feel is the best way to go? Just go one by one instead of having Mary Ann just read what we can read? Did you want to speak specifically to a waiver, or that's already been brought up, or?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I guess I just wanted to tee up my comments in summary, so I'm not getting up every single time. So if I could just say this.
Why don't we go through it, and then we'll hear from you. It's your birthday. Happy birthday.
Yesterday was my birthday. Today is my last day of work at the Land Council.
We're waiting
Should have
for
been done at
Emily.
4.
Why don't you get Emily
I think
up
it'd be
here to
better.
talk?
I think if I could just slightly disagree, I think it'd be better if I just say something right now.
Better for who?
Better for you. Trust me, that's all in the interest of you.
What do we think?
That's fine.
Go ahead.
Look, as it relates to the entirety of the regulations, I just want to restate something that we wrote in our December letter. Quote, nowhere in the statute or governing regulations is an applicant authorized to demand waivers from locally adopted regulations without providing the board and the public with support for why those waivers are required to prevent the project from being uneconomic pursuant to the statute. So if they're talking about, oh, we're trying to mimic another zoning area of the island, that has nothing to do with what we're doing. So we'd love a nice, concise, we got no time. We should be talking about every waiver and how it relates to the project being uneconomic. I just wanted to tee it up for the summary. I know we're not even going to be able to get there. We're almost entering third hour of this. We appreciate the time to talk about the waivers, but I just wanted to say that in summary. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to comment on that, or George and Ed, if you want to. I mean, we can. The uneconomic issue comes up if we are not willing to grant the waiver. If we're willing as a board to grant the waiver, then that discussion doesn't have to happen on every waiver request. If we deny every waiver request, then yeah, then they probably make the argument that it's uneconomic, and we'd have to talk every one of them. Is that a fair assessment of the process?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the question is.
Well, the question seemed to be, should we be talking about each one of the individual waivers as they relate to the economics of the project, and the applicant should make the case as to why each waiver is necessary to allowing the project to be economic. But as I said, we may not have a problem with some of these waivers.
That's right. It goes back to what I said about the two-prong approach, basically, that you follow in these. Is number one, you can impose reasonable conditions and requirements and deny something reasonably. If you've done that and the developer doesn't agree with it, the developer would have two options. Number one, to prove that that is not a reasonable denial or condition or requirement. And number two, that that denial, condition, or requirement renders the project uneconomic. And at that point, you would have that discussion. And again, this goes back to what I had said before. It's a preferable process to have that take place in the public hearing and then have the pro forma come out and discuss it and have it reviewed. If it has to take place at the HAC level, that's where that could potentially take place. And that's not unheard of for that to happen, because if a board goes through the comprehensive permit process and ends up issuing its decision, the developer may look at that final decision and determine on their own that certain conditions render it uneconomic. They choose to go to HAC at that point, but that's how the order of the discussion would go.
Okay, so how does the board feel? Do you want to go through these one by one with some general guidance, or go through the whole list and then go home? Because it'll be
What's the difference between
7:30.
that?
What do you want to do? What are you
I don't
saying?
understand the question.
Let's, I think we should go through them one by one and give, now unfortunately, Mary Ann has said on several of them already, I don't know if we need this waiver, because we don't have a plan in front of us, so it is sort of a waste of time, but we can probably knock some of them out. Let's go
This
with,
allows the public to comment if they have any comments,
fine.
which they won't be able to do.
Yeah, well, let's start, but let's not go through the whole list.
Yeah.
Let's start knocking them off one by one. 139-7, use chart.
But we,
The same, well, they would like us to allow apartment buildings as applicable to the condominium component of the application, which of course is prohibited in LUG 2.
we're still gonna have
It's a
that
deal,
waiver.
what's that?
That's still gonna be
That's a waiver that they've requested, and it's probably gonna remain.
It's gonna remain.
Unless there's some epiphany.
Absolutely.
So, how do we feel about that?
Well, it depends on the size of the buildings.
Right, so we still need more information,
That's
in other
right.
words.
That one needs more
Okay.
information.
The overlay districts, 139-12B, overlay districts, they're not requesting either waiver, although they reserve the right to ask for it later, of course. So there's no, do we agree there's no need to discuss that?
Yes.
Yes.
The intensity regulations, I think we should discuss. Because
Okay.
I think that was something we started to discuss two or three meetings ago.
Well,
You had a proposal.
we had gone, yeah, and I was just looking for it.
Well, I
can't
remember
find
you
it.
had said that the side and rear yard, one was 5, the side yard, one was 5, one was 10?
Right, but I understand what the applicant, what Marianne was saying, in saying that as the ground cover is only 30%, that the the 5 and 5 maybe makes.
Well, I'm thinking with less ground cover, why couldn't you have a bigger setback
I
on
mean, I
one
think
side?
you could, yeah, I think it just depends on,
Didn't we propose jogging it 5 feet in one area, 10 feet the other?
Yeah, one side 5, the other side 10.
Yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah.
I think what we talked about too was without a parking, seeing how the parking was gonna work.
Do you think it's fair to say that without the plan in front of us, it's hard to
hard to
discuss
talk
this?
well, the other thing
I have
I
one other thing though,
The
yeah.
other thing I want to say is that when we met on, whatever day, what day did we meet last? Tuesday? When we met on Tuesday and we thought we were getting the 92 plan with these considerations that we had discussed at the last meeting, which was the 11th, is that right? I'm pretty sure Mr. Feely was adamant that we accept the 92 plan as it was and you weren't going to make any of those changes. So is that a wasteful discussion for us to have now? Because we're talking about the same thing we talked about on the 11th, that we thought you were taking into consideration for the 26th, and then you said on the 26th no, and now we're back, you said 100, and now we're back here talking about the 92. So I don't want to have that conversation again if you're not going to even entertain it.
So there's not going to be a submittal of any additional plans beyond the 92-unit proposal. You're certainly free to have whatever discussion, amongst the board that you want to have with regard to whatever conditions you want to impose, and it'll be incumbent upon the applicants to either determine that they're okay with them or whether they object to them and have to
Yeah.
take an appeal.
And/or continue the hearing because we're making progress. So, I personally think it's pretty difficult to get super specific until we see the plan. The plan that we had was a sketch plan. It had no dimensions on it. It had no frontage numbers. It had no driveways.
No
So it was very
sheds.
hard to make these determinations. And I will say that rather than a hard and fast rule, which we explained to the applicant, we had put forth what we thought were guidelines, and if the applicant had come back and said, it didn't quite work everywhere, we got the 48 here and 62 here, you know, that, we were certainly open to that kind of discussion.
I did think that we made a comment that the 0 front yard setback wasn't.
Yeah, I think the 0 front yard setback is tough to swallow. It's a health and safety issue. You can't see around the corner, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah,
The
so.
only place that I think it may be appropriate would be, as Marianne was saying, where I could maybe see my way, and I'm just one person, to having because I think we had said 10-foot setback was maybe what we were
Well, I'm okay
providing
with
for
5,
guidance,
I
or
think.
5, okay. But in the areas where Marianne was saying that where the abutters are there, that those homes could be closer to the roadway.
If I could make a general comment?
Yeah, please.
This is a general comment. It applies to any waivers here. You'll note that in the third row, they talk about allow frontage of 25 feet, one lot. What you want is specificity. It's one sort of agreement if it's for 1 or 2 lots. You don't want a general waiver that says allow front yard setback of 0 feet. When you get the plan, or when they do the plan, they should say on lots 17 and 22.
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
So again, and that speaks to the point I was trying to make before. We're not, you know, this is still, we're trying to do something that's reasonable.
Right.
And if you force us into making just blanket statements, we would have to do that. But arguably, if we have a plan in front of us and we can see the why, that speaks to Mr. Perry's comment about why do you need the waiver? Oh,
Right.
well, this one, blah, blah, blah. So
Yep.
without the plan, it just seems too difficult. And, as Ed said, too unspecific. So can we move on from that one?
Yes. What's the trees and shrubs? Let's see.
Well, did I miss one? Screening of parking? Parking areas of,
Oh, I'm on the wrong page, sorry.
no worries. 139-19B, 1 and D, screening of parking areas of 20 cars or more require a 10-foot planting strip buffer.
Doesn't look like that's gonna be required, except for that one area by the, community building.
Again, is it fair to say we need to see the plan? Because
Yep.
as the applicant has stated, the fewer units, it's more green space, it's less impervious, so there's probably more room for trees. So we need to see the plan. Uh, 13920.1, driveway access, waive the requirement for approval of driveway access by Nantucket Department of Public Works for each driveway. I mean, that's a general one. Maybe we don't have to see the plan on that
I
one.
think we could waive that.
We can waive that, you think?
So,
Oh, we have to see the plan, but yeah.
As
I mean,
long as
that
there's a
doesn't mean that
driveway.
they don't have to go to the DPW to get their permit, that's all they're asking.
That's all.
That's fine. But we'll see it on the comprehensive plan,
The driveway,
yes.
yeah.
We're acting as a DPW in that regard.
I mean, I should know this, but what does the DPW look at when they look at the driveway? The apron,
I think so, yeah.
apron length?
And the size, there's
And the width.
And the width.
Some
yeah.
requirements.
Okay, yeah, so it has to meet
It's in
the
it's in
requirements.
bylaw.
Not more than one drive, B, paren 1, not more than one driveway access allowed on the lot. Waiver requirement for the condominium component, which will have access at the front and rear. Now, again, this was the 100, is this applicable anymore? Yes?
We'll still need 2 driveway accesses on, at least on the condo lots.
Just out of curiosity, is the on the 92 unit, configuration, is it one big condo lot?
No.
Or are they separated by building? Not that, I'm just curious.
Well, we haven't seen any parking on the condo lots yet, have we, on the 92-unit plan?
I think so. I think the idea would be to have one condo lot, like we've always been showing, and then the duplexes in the front would be on each individual lot. So the parking will be on the condo lot with the condos.
Okay.
That's what we plan on doing.
Right. The last plan we had didn't show any of that yet. Well, oh, no, that's not true. I'm sorry, it's scratched over. It's on the street in front of all the condos.
But that would be part of the condo lot?
It looks like, oh, no, I don't know.
No?
It's hard to tell.
I don't know that it matters, but.
The intent is to have the street with the on-street parking part of the right-of-way. So,
Right. That's the parking for the condos. You're not having separate parking lots on the condo lots.
Well, there's only one condo lot.
there is a small, I mean, if I'm thinking of the
There's two
right,
separate ones separated by green space. Well, it's hard to see.
there's that loop driveway with the parking off of it that
Yeah.
goes to the condos?
Yeah.
Yes, so that would be on the, those parking lots will be on the
It's a
condo
little
lot.
easier to see.
Okay, again, is it fair to say that we need the plan?
Yep.
I hate to be a broken record, but
I hate to go back to this driveway access, but is there a reason there's a waiver? Is it just you don't want to go to the public? Department of Public, or are there specific requirements that you have issue with?
No, it's just that we don't want to go to the DPW. The requirement, the only one was, the one, not more than one driveway access per lot, and then the minimum driveway width. There's a list of other things that the DPW generally looks at, but we intend to comply with those, or we would have asked for a waiver from those. So we just basically
Well, I
don't
mean,
want to have to go to the DPW to approve each driveway.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, now that you bring it up, Marion, if there are other rules and regs you have to follow, it makes sense for you to apply to the DPW so you're on the radar when you get your permit, because they're the ones who would then check that you're in compliance. We're certainly
No,
not
we're
going to do
asking,
that.
the plan will demonstrate that we're in compliance.
Well, but
And
then
as the permit granting authority,
occasionally,
you have to
people
look
don't
at
do
it.
what's on the plan, just occasionally.
I understand that.
So we would like the DPW to check that, and therefore you need a DPW permit.
Well, it wouldn't be a DPW permit.
would
It
have
would be the comprehensive permit, but your decision can have a condition that says final plans shall show this information, which shall be reviewed and administratively approved by the DPW. That's perfectly acceptable.
Works
It's
for
just
me.
not a different
Yeah?
permitting process.
Yeah, but that's different than, you want to
Yeah.
bring the DPW into this process now, so that they can look at this plan as well.
On the
So,
11th.
What I'm saying is, there's a.
No,
there's
between
a
now
list
and then,
of-
between now
trying
and
to
the
get as
11th.
much as you
But we don't have a
can.
plan.
There's
I
a
know.
list of local officials and boards that you want to make sure have seen this final phase of this process, so that
Okay,
they can
but-
weigh into.
Do we at least have the regulations at the planning board? That the,
plan to Robert Neal,
do the,
Yeah,
the
so you want to
department
send
of.
the next one to Robert Neal as well.
when I get it.
Well, but just to beat the horse, we're going to get it the 10th or 11th. We can't. I thought we could not get commentary from town boards after that. If the hearing closes on the 11th.
Right, we won't be able to.
Right.
But, what's the expression when, some type of divine intervention occurs? I mean, maybe something will happen that, give the DPW enough time to review it. If you don't have enough information when you're considering each one, you're gonna have to deny them.
Okay. Fair enough. If we don't feel like we have enough, did you want to speak, Ed?
Respectfully, Mr. Chairman, this is...
Hold on one sec.
Okay.
As a practical matter, there are requests for waivers that are substantive, there are requests for waivers that are process-oriented. And it recognizes the fact that this is a comprehensive permit and you act on behalf of local boards. What I've seen happen on waivers like this that says, waiver granted as long as applicant complies with all applicable DPW requirements related to driveways. They have to do that. And then your zoning enforcement officer will enforce the conditions and requirements of the comprehensive permit.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I was getting at. What Mary Ann's saying is she agrees with all the requirements. She just doesn't want to go to.
Yeah,
And
which
so
is-
that's good
Not
to
asking,
know.
yeah.
It
So
just
in-
needs to
So
say.
if you go to the board after the comprehensive permit and they turn you down, that's not a waiver. You have to comply.
If we have not requested specific waivers, then, you know, and we submit final plans and they don't comply with your requirements, then that's on us, that's not on you. And we would have to come back and see if you would grant, you know, a modification of the permit to make them comply with whatever we did submit. But technically, there's no waiver required here. As Ed mentioned, it's a process. It's not really a waiver. When the board issues a comprehensive permit, you are issuing all local permits. But generally, I mean, and obviously I was not involved in the submittal of this application, but when I represent boards, I like to be over-inclusive with regards to the waiver submittals, because some boards take a different approach and they want to see everything. When I represent boards and I see a waiver list come in here like this, what I would generally recommend to them is to say waiver denied as unnecessary because it's subsumed as part of the comprehensive permit process. Therefore, you make it clear that the request was made. You're acknowledging, you know, that your decision is granting this relief as acting as that particular local official. But you're not really requesting a waiver, and you're not granting any waiver of specific requirements with regard to that issue.
Right. I mean, for instance, a specific requirement was asked for as a waiver early on, the minimum driveway width of 10 feet. They wanted to go to 9. They've subsequently gotten rid of that waiver. So that would have been a specific waiver that we could have or not.
And that would be substantive, not process.
Right. I got it.
I hate to, you know, belabor it, but it's still helpful. I mean, I just heard from one of the board members that you didn't know the reasons for certain requirements or what was required. I would recommend strongly you still have the local official take a look at it if he can, to give you input. He may say to you, there are standards that aren't met by this plan. And then so you want to end up in
What plan
a...
are you talking about, George?
Right, the 92...
Doesn't show a driveway?
The 92-unit plan.
It has no driveways on it.
It will.
But how can, I'm asking.
Have it looked for
That's,
today.
so if I can just
But Ed,
finish...
this goes back to my question.
Yeah.
It will, but if we grant the approval, how could we ever contest it then if we don't agree with what?
It puts you in a very difficult position. You want to try to get input from relevant officials. In terms of the waiver, I agree with most of what Paul is saying, the way he's describing it, that they're seeking a waiver of having to go to DPW to get the approvals. They want that from you. But I'm just saying it's helpful to get the input of any local official who would have regulatory authority over this to give you some recommendations. And again, it's a very tight time frame. Maybe Rob McNeil, or the DPW director, maybe he won't have a chance to review it and give you any meaningful input, but he should certainly be able to elaborate to you the, you know, issues that they have. What's required for a curb cut? What type of widths do they require? What type of length? What's the reason for it? So that you can determine, you know, if that site plan is acceptable or not. You know, maybe a foot doesn't make an appreciable difference in a certain place, but maybe 1 foot makes a huge difference in another place on this. So, you know, if his input is helpful to you, you do want to try to get it before you condition this. You don't want to end up, even if certain things are subject to administrative review and approval later on, you don't want to end up in an enforcement situation or a vagary about what's required in your permit.
I'm just going to say one more thing, George. I think the way, at least on the lots, the way it works is that the applicant will prepare a plan for each lot and ask for a building permit on that lot. At that time, the building inspector will review the requirements, the DPW requirements, and make a determination as to whether or not they're satisfied. I don't think the board or the town has any risk on this as long as the building inspector does what he or she should do. And truth be told, there are going to be some minor there are always changes after the issuance of a permit, and it might move over a little bit, there might be some change in dimension. As long as it's they're not asking for any relief from the requirements on driveways here.
Yeah.
All they're asking, that they don't have to make that extra step to get approval from DPW. They still have to get a building permit for that lot.
Okay, thank you. Cormac?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just a request through you to the rest of to you and the rest of the board, just because everybody's under the gun. Perhaps it would be helpful to invite every department head, including the fire chief, the police chief, to attend this next meeting. Maybe there'll be things applicable to them, maybe there won't, but it just might behoove everybody, and it'd be in everybody's best interest that if there is a question and we're wondering what the DPW head would say, maybe it's best that he's here. Just a request. Thank you.
It's a good one. Good one.
And Mr. Chairman, as the specifics on the plans with regard to the driveways are being finalized, we're certainly happy to have Don reach out to the DPW director to see if he has any concerns.
Thank you. Okay, what time we quitting?
I was going to say
Pretty soon? Midnight?
8:20 vote.
I like it. Okay, so, couple things. We're not getting through all the waivers, obviously. We need an extension to the, you're willing to give us the extension to the 11th now?
Yes, if you're going to continue this hearing to the 11th, we will give you an extension to that date.
Okay.
How long do we have the room on that day?
Until, well, 4:30, but there's, the next meeting, it starts at 6. Let me double
Well, like I said, I'm leaving, and I'm not changing my plan. So,
I mean, I
We
know
can
that they
start
won't have
earlier.
any information by the 4th. Why wouldn't we do a little bit on the 4th? Because we
Well,
won't have any plans by the 4th?
I've already put ad in the paper for that meeting for the regular stuff, so I have to do something. Anyway.
For what, the 4th or the
So
11th?
The 11th. Why are we meeting on the 4th and going through whatever plans you can come up with by the 4th?
well,
We're not going to have any plans ready to give to you. by
Well,
the 4th.
let me
There's a lot
speak
of
to that
additional
point.
information we're looking
You
at.
do have some plans ready for us in terms of, let's say, the cottages. Maybe instead of doing the data dump the night before, maybe it makes sense to get this stuff piecemeal.
I think we
Yeah.
have
Because then I have
to
a-
start on the, do some stuff on the 4th. I just don't
Yeah.
want to put this all off to 2 hours on the 11th. I
Me
don't think
neither.
it's fair to us or
It's not fair
anybody.
to the public, it's not fair to,
It's absurd.
and it's also, it's unnecessary. We've already agreed that we're all gonna meet on the 4th. If we have even, I agree with Ed, if we have the cottage part of it, or where it's, you've gotta have, you're not gonna have
Some
everything.
information.
You're gonna have some information by the 4th.
That we can talk about.
I can post it on the town website.
Yeah, I mean, I will have a discussion, but that was not the substance of the proposal. We didn't want to have to go through another lengthy hearing process.
Well-
Mr. Chairman,
Sorry.
I understand where the board is coming from on this. I don't think there's necessarily a reciprocal understanding of where my clients are coming from.
But then maybe we should just go ahead on the 4th, no matter what, and close the public hearing on that date with whatever information we have, if we don't have enough.
Well, the question before us, in my opinion, is would we prefer to be talking about the 92-unit plan versus the 100-unit plan, which we don't have all the information on either, by the way.
But I just think that this was a time grab. Like, we talked about the 92 plan on,
it's just so
two
frustrating.
design things, the 11th with a 92 plan, and then we come in on the 26th, and it's like, no, 92, we're gonna do 100, you either do it now or not. And now we're back to the 92, like, what a waste.
It just makes us feel like you're just trying to get us the shortest amount of time that you can to let us review anything.
It does not seem
Yes,
reasonable. That's-
let me have a discussion with my clients, but I just wanted to respond to that last comment. You have to understand that I just got brought into this
I know.
process.
We know that.
2 days
We're not
ago.
blaming you.
And I'm not suggesting you're blaming me, but what I'm trying to suggest is that having some new guidance, we're trying to shift back to a place where we can try to get you to be able to take a vote on the 92. So this was not like we're trying to rush you to do something. This was,
Don't laugh, come on.
so I came in, and you were and the status was at one place, and I was trying to help bring it back to get to a point where I think that you can issue a decision on a plan that you thought was the more appropriate plan. And we have limitations with regards to how we get to there, but I'm trying my best to get us there. Yeah.
I just, once you have a chance to talk, I think that was the original proposal presented. I think that the applicant would be amenable to continue the discussion, continue the hearing to April 4, get you as much further information as they can, if any, by then, and I think that they're agreeing to extend the public hearing deadline to the 11th as well. And even if that ends up a big data dump on the 10th or 11th, I think that they are agreeing now to continue to the 4th, accomplish what you can, and then, and they're also agreeing to extend to the 11th so that you can have another public hearing session, I
Right.
believe.
I mean, I would say the alternative would be to give us a one more week extension and go to the 18th and not meet until the 11th. They didn't want to do that, so.
Could I suggest that you stick to the 92 plan? This business about going to the 4th and talk, because you want to talk
No,
about
that
the
would be
100
on the 92 plan. On the 92
Stay
plan.
on the 92 plan.
That's what we're talking about.
We're not, nobody's talking about the 100.
So I think they can confirm that.
The 11th.
The 11th would be
The
during the
11th is
day.
a regular scheduled meeting. It's at 1 o'clock. That's when it would be.
Right.
Which is, again, an inconvenience for the public. but-
For the public, right. So that's why I think having the
Why don't we-
fourth meeting is important.
Can we go to the 10th?
Can we just discuss what they agreed to?
Sure.
Yeah, we're trying.
You decide what to do.
Well, one of the issues is,
Tell you what he's decided.
oh, you decided something different. Okay, go.
Well, I haven't made any decisions, but my discussion with my client is they're willing to come back on the 4th, and you can have whatever discussion it is that you want to have. We can't commit to submittal of any additional information because we're not going to be producing it. Our consultants will be producing it. We've already had discussions with them and twisted arms to get them to agree that they will do what it takes to get the material before you in advance of the 11th.
right, well-
I don't know what, if anything, could be done in time for the 4th, but, if there is material we can get, we'll do it.
I don't see any real point in meeting on the 4th. If we don't have a new plan, we can't talk about waivers.
I don't know why we couldn't just get an extension till the 18th.
I would my only other comment about the 11th and the regularly scheduled meeting, it is during the day. I know it was a convenient target date, but what is the real difference in, number one, giving you more time to generate information, to going to, let's say, April 15th, or some date other than the regularly scheduled meeting, which is at 1 o'clock, which the public has a difficult time attending or watching. Net, what's the difference of a week? I'm not trying to elongate this.
It's a difficult week because that's school vacation week.
Oh.
Monday is a holiday. First of all, I didn't realize that the hearing started at 1 o'clock regularly on the 11th. Is there an ability for the board to meet the next day on the 12th, on a Friday, which is unusual?
I'm away. So I guess we keep it a little.
Going off island too.
I'm on Friday.
Yeah, no. So, I guess it's, I guess we're just in a bad place, and we'll do our best to extricate ourselves.
And I just think it's like saying that you had to twist all these people's arms to get the work done. Well, only because you're putting a limitation on yourself. We're asking you and saying, we're willing to have more time so we can have a better conversation about it. So, the only reason you're twisting people's arms to get work is because you've created this artificial deadline.
And I understand where you're coming from on that, but my only response would be, I've been involved in, literally hundreds of these types of hearings, and I've been on both sides of it, and I've been, where boards want more time and developers don't want to grant it. Each side has their reasons for why they want to do it. We're not being arbitrary. We're not trying to force you to make a
Bless
decision
you.
with less than the quantum of information you need. But the process has been going on for a long time, and my clients are at the point where it simply needs to be completed.
We
Okay.
understand that.
Yeah, believe me, we want it
we want
over
it
with.
over
too.
And I understand that as well.
But in fairness to us, we only arrived at the 92-unit plan March 11th.
And then it was pulled out from,
So
then
that
it was
gave
pulled
us,
away from
yeah,
us,
that
so-
gave us literally, right.
And as of
Frankly, the
Tuesday,
last month has been a complete
Waste of time.
And you guys have
And you
wasted
guys
our
have
time
created
for a
it.
month, and you're giving us an extra week to come to a decision.
Yeah, that's
I
just
think
not
it's
right.
really unfair.
I think more than that, I think they've wasted, well, I guess we're back to the 92, so I take back my comment that we wasted since January.
All right, let's go to the 11th. We'll have 2 hours. We're gonna get it done. Okay, wait a minute. We got other business. We need the extension.
Hopefully nobody's sick.
I don't really see the need.
If
Well,
they're
we're
not going to
gonna have
provide
any
any information, then no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other issue that we need to discuss is that the consultant fee account needs to be replenished. How do we go, what is the procedure for that? I ask? Yeah, I'm asking you to replenish it, guys. Hello?
Who are you asking?
No.
No, we haven't done anything yet. Thank you, though, Terry.
I know. I'm gonna go home and
Chairman Toole,
Yeah,
while you're waiting for this, may I make a comment?
sure.
My name is Bert Balkine. I live on Scotts Way, and I see this as an imposed deadline by the developers, and I, as a public member, I haven't been able to process the 1,100 pages we got yesterday for this meeting, and if we're going to get another data dump, it just seems like it's very unfair to the public for us to comment and make reasonable, requests of the board in reviewing the applicant's proposal. So I just want to say that I really just feel this is unfair to the public and also to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so on the extension, couldn't I get a motion to accept the extension till April 11th, 1 o'clock here?
So moved.
I'll second.
Kiram seconds it.
That's not what you're.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Continue the hearing.
The continuance of the deadline to close the public hearing.
Okay.
You're gonna have a separate vote when you're gonna continue the public hearing.
Gotcha.
You have to have extensions first.
Got it.
And
Got
you're
you.
gonna document it, then you're gonna vote.
I
right.
retract that motion.
Restate that, George, so I get it right. What am I voting on
Vote
first?
to accept the extension.
I thought I just did that.
But you included the time of day, and you should have left that out. It's
Got
till
ya.
midnight.
Okay. Got you. So, can I get a motion to accept the extension of the deadline to close the public hearing till to April 11th?
So moved.
So moved. Okay. Kieran, seconded.
Who made the motion?
Jim made, proposed. Any further discussion? No. All say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so then what do I do?
Then you're gonna ask for a motion to continue
All right.
the hearing to a date certain.
All right, so can I get a motion to continue the hearing to a date certain, being April 11th, 1 o'clock?
So moved.
Thank you. At this location.
So moved.
Okay? You second that one as well? Any further discussion? No. All those in favor say aye. Aye. So what was the response to the fees? You're going to replenish the fee?
Yes.
Thank you.
They've been good about that.
Thank you. Okay, so can I get a motion to adjourn tonight? Meeting. Thank you. Who wants to second that?
Oh, sorry, Jim.
No problem.
No one? You want to stay?
Technically, it doesn't require
Okay, any
one.
further discussion? No. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
It's usually not this hard.
Thanks for.
At all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For the comment.
I'm not gonna